The highway doesn't care if you believe in monsters. It creates its own. Every night, truck drivers encounter things that make no sense, see people who shouldn't exist, and hear voices on channels that should be silent. Tonight, you're getting 11 real accounts from the road. No fluff, no dramatic buildup, just the raw truth about what happens when you're hauling freight through America's darkest corners. These drivers faced stalkers at rest stops, saboteurs tampering with their rigs, and phantom vehicles that vanish without explanation. From brake lines mysteriously cut in Wyoming to voices whispering threats over CB radios. These stories will change how you think about every truck you pass on the interstate. Subscribe to Verified Fears if you want more real horror that doesn't need special effects to terrify you. Let's move to our first story. I roll out of the Omaha distribution yard just after 21:30, a sharp autumn wind needling through my jacket as I finish the pre-trip on my 2017 Peterbilt 579. She's a refrigerated unit loaded nose to tail with boxes of lettuce and strawberries, produce that won't wait for sunrise. Dispatch wants me in Denver by 6 a.m., no excuses. I punch the onboard, log myself on duty, and ease through the gate, letting the turbo spool while the yard lights fade behind me. Night runs aren't my favorite, but produce doesn't care about preferences, and the money's better when you keep rolling through the dark. The CB is mostly quiet, except for the occasional weather update. Light fog pockets west of Lincoln. Winds quartering out of the northwest. Nothing I haven't handled 100 times. Once I settle into 8th gear on I-80, the rhythm kicks in. Tires humming, engine note deep and steady, reefer unit chattering like a distant lawnmower behind the cab. I sip burnt truck stop coffee and watch mile markers flick past. About 40 minutes out, just east of York, I give a courtesy call. Breaker 19, westbound, produce wagon out of Omaha headed to Denver. Anybody riding? Only static answers, punctuated by the hiss of an open mic somewhere farther down the band. That isn't unusual. CB chatter has thinned since smartphones took over. But the silence still feels heavier at night, like the road itself is holding its breath. Around mile marker 329, a set of headlights swings onto the ramp behind me, but whoever it is keeps their distance. I can barely make out the silhouette in my mirrors. Big rig, probably another dry van. But they're running with dims on and no marker lights at the top corners. That's odd. DOT can write you up for lights out. I chalk it up to a lazy bulb, or maybe a driver who hasn't noticed a breaker tripped in the fuse box. 10 miles later, the same rig is still back there at a steady 200 yards, like a shadow glued to my trailer doors. I key up again. Westbound, you riding my back door, you need around say the word. Plenty of room. Silence. The tiny hairs on my forearms prickle. I tell myself it's nothing. Focus on the clock and the talk. The schedule rules everything out here. Fall behind, lose the load, lose the load, lose the paycheck. York's sodium lights drop away, and I'm swallowed by proper night. No farmhouses, no exits for another stretch. My coffee's gone lukewarm, and to keep awake I flip through podcasts, but cell reception dives, leaving me with the CB and my own thoughts. 20 minutes later, a single voice breaks in. Rough, almost mechanical. No handle. Keep right, lane 5, it says. No call sign, no location, nothing. The voice cuts out so quickly, I'm not even sure it was real. There is no lane 5 out here. Just 2 westbound lanes, asphalt bleached gray by headlights. I flick my markers twice in acknowledgement, hoping whoever transmitted will clarify. But the radio returns to dead air. The rig behind me flashes high beams. Off, on, off again. I glance at my dash. Oil pressure steady, coolant good, task sitting pretty at 1,350. Nothing wrong under my hood. So why am I sweating? Nebraska's way station at North Platte is still 130 miles off. I think about calling dispatch, but they'll only tell me to keep rolling unless I'm in imminent danger. Besides, admitting fear over the wire feels like amateur hour. I click on the trailer cam, installed after a rash of cargo thefts last year, and see nothing but an empty highway behind my doors. No headlights. That's impossible. I can feel whoever's there. My foot eases off the throttle just long enough for the cruise control to blink out, and the Pete slows to 60. If the follower is real, they'll close the gap. Nothing. Only darkness. I check mirrors again. They reflect starlight and the faint glow from my marker lights. Either my eyes are playing tricks or someone's running with every bulb blacked out. Why? Drug traffic? Cargo thieves? Plain stupidity? I bump the cruise back to 68 and force myself to breathe with the whoosh of the turbo. You've been on the road too long, I scold myself. Sleep debt makes ghosts. 50 miles later, I hit the Odessa rest area. The place is half lit, 2 overhead lamps busted, and the parking lot's a patchwork of shadow. I nose in beside a cattle hauler whose driver is dead asleep, curtains drawn. I kill the engine, leave the reefer running, and climb down to stretch. Cold air bites, carrying the antiseptic stink of bleach from inside the bathrooms. I circle the trailer, checking seals and brake lines out of habit. That's when I see it. A thin slash in the flexible rubber hose feeding the driver's side rear brake chamber, fresh, edges clean. If that line blows under pressure, I lose brakes on that axle. Under load, I could jackknife. My stomach free falls. I was rolling at highway speed minutes ago. Another 30 miles and I'd be cresting Lincoln County's gentle but unforgiving hills with half a brake system. Someone did this at speed or at our last fuel stop, and counted on me not noticing until the worst possible moment. I squat, run a finger along the cut. It's just deep enough to weep under pressure, but not split. Somebody who knows rigs made that incision. I pull out duct tape and a spare hose clamp. MacGyver, a temporary fix. While I work, I listen. Wind rattling a loose flag, idle hum of sleepers, distant semis droning past. Nothing else. But the sense of being watched thrums under my skin. I finish, stand, and scan the line of parked rigs. A few cabs glow blue from TV screens. Most are dark. No sign of my phantom tail. I hurry back inside, lock both doors, and punch the brakes for a static pressure test. They hold, for now. Dispatch barely reacts when I call. Copy that, driver. Note the damage and we'll flag maintenance in Denver. Can you still deliver? Translation. Keep moving. Produce waits for no one. I could push back, but time is money, and the fix feels solid enough. I top off coffee from my thermos, take 2 caffeine pills, and roll out. Back on I-80, traffic is non-existent. The moon has dipped, leaving me in velvet dark. I set the cruise at 63 to reduce stress on the patched line. Minutes later, faint headlights appear, then vanish again behind me, too far to gauge distance. Breaker, westbound shadow, identify. I bark into the mic, trying to sound bored rather than scared. Static answers. I key up again and give my location, truck color, trailer company decals, everything but my plate. A decades-old habit meant to establish legitimacy. Still nothing. Around mile marker 225, a green sign warns of construction ahead. Single-lane traffic, cones, narrow shoulders. Perfect. The silhouette behind me materializes out of the gloom as I ease into the merge. No lights, just the suggestion of mass, as though the highway itself has knotted into something solid. My mirror shows an outline. Flat-top sleeper, maybe older freightliner. My pulse spikes. Dot finds can't be worth running that dark. Whoever it is has a reason, and none of the explanations are good. The construction zone lasts 5 miles, interminable in the dark. Speed limit 55. My Peterbilt crawls at 50. The shape behind me matches perfectly, never closer, never farther. I consider keying the mic on channel 19 and leaving it open. Maybe the construction crews monitor, but if the stalkers got malicious intent, broadcasting fear could paint a target even brighter. At the end of the construction zone, traffic widens to 2 lanes again. I flip my right blinker, slide to the slow lane, and feather the brakes. My improvised patch holds, hiss steady. "Westbound, you're clear to pass," I offer. Still silence, but the shadow does pull left, drifting alongside. For a breathless second, I think I'll get a look. But as my cab and theirs draw even, every light on the other rig blinks alive. Brights, clearance lamps, amber markers, so bright they white out my side mirror. I shield my eyes, blindsided. Then, like a switch, the lights cut and the truck drops back so fast it must be braking hard. They fall behind my trailer doors again and vanish. I'm shaking now. I tap my horn twice, short courtesy honks, and floor it to 70, risking the patch. My GPS says 87 miles to the Wyoming port of Entryway Station. That becomes my lifeline. If I can make the scale house, I'll have uniformed officers, floodlights, cameras. No phantom convoy wants that attention. Minutes stretch into decades. My throat dries. Every mile marker I count aloud, forcing calm. 10 miles from the state line, fog rolls in, thick, ground-hugging, reducing visibility to the reach of my high beams. Moisture beads on the windshield. Wipers squeak. The temperature gauge dips, 44 degrees Fahrenheit. Condensation steams off the reefer's exhaust. Through the murk, red LED dots resolve ahead. Tail lights, maybe a mile up. I catch them slowly. They belong to a pair of grain hoppers riding tandem, farmers probably hauling late to meet an early elevator schedule. Good. Witnesses. I call a heads up on the radio. The forward driver returns a cheery, "Bring it on, produce wagon. Road's yours." His voice is a balm, normal, human. I tuck in behind the grain haulers. The instant I do, the follower reappears in my mirror, sliding into the right lane, drawing level with my trailer. Only this time I see them plainly. An older international cab over, paint charcoal, no company logo, an empty fifth-wheel backplate. They're bobtailing, no trailer attached. No wonder they can maneuver so fast. But why tail a loaded reefer? Cargo theft usually needs a second trailer to transload. None of it computes. The bobtail drifts closer, driver's window lining up with mine. Streetlight glow from the grain hoppers flickers across his cab. For a moment, I glimpse the driver, or think I do. The side glass is tinted darker than factory spec, maybe even painted. From my angle, I can't see a face, only the faint illumination of a dashboard. He hangs there, pacing me. I wave, a "what do you want" gesture. He accelerates suddenly, no lights still, pulls in front of me, then cuts right, sliding between my nose and the second grain hopper's trailer hitch, a gap barely 70 feet. The grain hauler's horn erupts, furious. I stomp the brakes, patched lines squealing but holding. My trailer shimmies, produce boxes shifting. The bobtail darts back into the left lane, overtakes the first hopper, and disappears into fog so thick it swallows tail lights whole. The hopper driver curses over the CB, asking if I'm okay. I manage a shaky affirmative. He says, "Idiot's gonna kill someone." I agree, but keep the rest to myself. We roll together until the Wyoming border sign flicks by and the way station off-ramp appears, amber flashers guiding us like a runway. Both hoppers peel into the bypass lane. They've been pre-cleared by transponder. My pre-pass inexplicably flashes red. Mandatory pull-in. Normally, I'd grumble about the delay, but tonight, it feels like salvation. I break onto the scale ramp, airbags hissing, heart thundering. The bobtail is nowhere in sight. Scale house lights glare white against fog. I stop where marked, roll down the window, and hand my papers to the officer on duty, a burly man in a high-vis jacket. He flips pages, gives the rig a once-over with a flashlight, and frowns at the duct-taped brake hose. Temporary repair, I explain, voice steadier than I expect. Full fix scheduled in Denver morning shift. He nods, scribbles a note. I risk a question. You see a gray cab over bobtail blow through here? No plates on the bumper? The officer's eyebrow rises. Scale alarm tripped 5 minutes ago. Vehicle bypassed at 70 plus. That him? Likely, I answer, throat tight. He mutters about reckless endangerment, steps inside, radios highway patrol. While he talks, I stretch my legs near the cab, the way station floodlights banishing every shadow. Safe. Or so I think. When I climb back into the Pete, paperwork signed. I run a final inspection on the cameras. My rear-facing cam, wired to record continuously, shows blank static from 22:41 until now. 31 minutes erased. The forward cam, too, as if someone hit the hard reset. Those systems take a deliberate key sequence to disable. I sat behind the wheel the entire time. I pull off the scale, park in the adjacent lot, and kill the engine. The reefer hums alone. I could push on. The clock nags. But the adrenaline crash leaves me trembling. Better to sacrifice punctuality than run crippled brakes and no footage. I phone dispatch, digging for resolve. They listen, verify the GPS ping that shows me stationary at the scale, note the missing video feed. Stay put, driver, they finally say. Safety first. They'll send road service at dawn. In the sleeper, exhaustion hits like a dropped pallet. But my mind spins, replaying every detail. The slit brake hose, the voice saying, keep right, lane 5. The blackout trucks. Who sabotaged my line? What did they want? None of my cargo is high-value theft material. Produce spoils too fast. Maybe I was random, maybe a test for a more lucrative target. But then why erase my camera feed? Why toy on the road instead of striking outright? Questions pile up like bad weather. I bolt awake at 4:17 to the rumble of an engine idling nearby. Heart pounding, I peer through the curtain. Maintenance wrecker, orange strobe slow flashing. Relief. A mechanic named Harris replaces the hose properly. Signs the log. Sunrise limbs the horizon pink when I finally roll west again. The rest of the trip is uneventful. Way stations routine, CB voices mundane, no tales in the mirror. At the Denver dock, a foreman checks seals and waves me to Bay 4. While forklifts unload strawberries now bordering too warm, I open my side box to stow tools. Inside lies a business card that wasn't there before. Black matte finish, no name, only a single, printed phrase, lane 5, and a phone number. No area code, just 7 digits. My hands go cold. Somehow someone was inches from me after the sabotage, close enough to slip that card into locked storage. I turn it over. Nothing. White imprint outlines a logo long rubbed off, maybe a transport company, maybe a prank. My rational mind attempts comfort. Truck stops breed weird travelers, mechanics could be jokers, coincidences happen. Yet every time I tap the brake pedal now, I remember the hiss of a nearly severed line and the blank window where a driver's face should have been. Dispatch asks for an incident statement. I file it thorough. Safety department emails a polite thank you and promises investigation. Weeks pass. No follow-up. The number on the card? I never call. Some nights when the miles stretch lonely, I think about punching those digits into the sat phone just to hear what voice answers. But then I picture a convoy of unmarked rigs gliding dark on some forgotten highway, trailing me, waiting for me to forget the danger long enough to stop checking my mirrors. So I keep checking. Every stop, every hose, every lug nut. I listen to the CB chatter even when it's static, because I'd rather hear ghosts than be surprised by men. And when I crest a hill and the moon paints the asphalt silver, I sometimes catch a flash of headlights that die the instant I look. Maybe it's fatigue, maybe memory, or maybe the highway itself breeds predators who understand that fear is more potent when it remains unexplained. Either way, I roll on. Because freight still needs hauling, bills still need paying, and the road, indifferent and endless, will always have another lane where someone can hide. Let's move to our second story. I'm Smith, 28, 6 months out of CDL school, still getting used to the endless hum of interstate asphalt under a 2003 Freightliner Cascadia day cab. Tonight, I'm hauling 42,000 pounds of paper stock from Lexington, Kentucky, down to Atlanta on I-75. Dispatch wants me through Chattanooga before dawn to dodge morning congestion. So I left the shipper at 2100 and have been chewing miles ever since. The logbook's legal, the coffee's cheap, and the road is slick with an early spring drizzle that beads on the windshield like mercury. My CB stays tuned to channel 19 out of habit. But the chatter is thin. Just a few veteran hands grumbling about construction south of Knoxville. By 1:15, my eyelids sag. The caffeine has peaked, and the faint hiss of rain against the cab is hypnotic. I spot the blue and white rest area sign at mile marker 158. 3 miles ahead, right lane exit only. Perfect. I figure a quick 15-minute power nap and a walk around will keep me sharp till Georgia. I key the mic. Breaker 19. Anyone got eyes on that rest area ahead Chattanooga bound? A fuzzy voice comes back, heavy with Tennessee twang. Plenty of room, driver. Watch the potholes. Slick as owl snot tonight. I thank him, signal right, and ease down the ramp. The rest area sits in a shallow bowl of pine and sweet gum, lights half dim to save the state's electric bill. Only 6 rigs occupy the tractor-trailer lot, spaced like silent monuments. I glide into a pull-through slot between a cattle hauler and a flatbed loaded with steel coil, set the parking brakes with a hiss, and let the engine idle a minute to cool the turbo. The rain has tapered to mist, but fog curls at treetop level, turning the security lights into glowing halos. I crack the cab door and step onto wet asphalt, the humid air smelling of diesel exhaust, pine sap, and those antiseptic wafers they hang in the men's room. First things first, walk-around inspection. I click a flashlight on and trace the beam across my tires, making sure no duals are low and the mud flap bolts are still snug. I tap each strap on the box trailer, inspect the glad hand seals, then shine the light along the fifth wheel jaws. Everything's ship-shape. I stretch my lower back, feel vertebrae pop like knuckles, and glance at the cattle hauler next door. The animals inside shift restlessly, their breathing loud in the damp night. The driver's curtains are drawn tight. I climb back in, kill the headlights, and set a 15-minute phone alarm. Seat reclined, I close my eyes, letting the sound of the reefer units and distant highway traffic lull me. I'm hovering between wakefulness and dream when a metallic clink snaps me upright. A padlock striking metal maybe, amplified by the stillness. My heart bangs against my ribs. I thumb the alarm off and listen. Nothing now except a low groan from the cattle trailer and the hiss of air suspensions. Settling. I chalk it up to nerves, reach for the door handle, and slide out to make a quick restroom run. The fog has thickened. The rest area building is a vague shape 20 yards away, silhouetted by dim fluorescent tubes. As I walk, boots splashing in shallow puddles, I hear gravel crunch behind me. First turn. No one. The flatbed's tarps flap lazily in a breeze I can't feel. I scan the cars in the four-wheeler lot. 2 sedans, both dark. Probably nothing. Inside the restroom, the lights flicker but hold. I splash water on my face, the mirror showing a road-worn man with bloodshot eyes and 3-day stubble. While drying my hands on a paper towel, I catch motion in the reflection. A stall door easing shut at the far end. I hadn't heard anyone come in. "Evening," I say reflexively. No reply. I wait, listening for footsteps, zipper, toilet flush, nothing. The silence presses on my eardrums. I shake my head, drop the towel, and head out. Back in the lot, the fog is a wall. My Cascadia's marker lights glow faint amber 50 feet away. Halfway there, static crackles on my handheld CB clipped to my belt, a rogue transmission bleeding through. "Come out, big rig boy." The voice is male, raspy, almost playful. But it's on channel 19, open air. I spin around, scanning for cab lights or someone holding a walkie-talkie. The only movement is steam rising from the cattle hauler's exhaust stack. I quick step to the truck, climb in, and slam the door. I lock both latches, thumb the dome light off, and sit motionless, ears tuned to the night. The handheld CB hisses again, carrier wave but no words. I grab the mic on the dash. "Who's messing with me on 19? Silence follows, then a faint chuckle as if someone's covering the mic while laughing. My pulse drums against my neck. I remind myself there's an easy prank explanation, some bored driver with a linear amplifier and too much caffeine. Still, my stomach knots. I decide the nap is over. I'll push through Chattanooga and snooze at the company yard. I fire the engine, watch gauges sweep. Oil 40 psi, volts 13.8, air 120, and flip on the headlights. In the beams, a figure stands dead center of the exit lane, maybe 40 yards ahead. Male, average height, wearing a reflective vest and holding a large flashlight pointed down, lens covered by his palm so only a muted glow leaks out. Could be rest area security or DOT, but he's not waving me forward or motioning a stop. He's just standing. I key up again. "Driver in the vest, you need something?" The figure tilts his head, then raises the flashlight, shining it directly at my windshield. The beam blooms, forcing me to squint. Before I can respond, he switches it off, plunging us back into fogged-out gloom. When my eyes readjust, he's gone. No shuffle of footsteps, no silhouette in the mist. Enough. I flip on the roof-mounted LED bar, bathing the lane in white light, and ease the Cascadia forward, adrenaline, overriding caution. A quick right. I'm on the ramp back to I-75 southbound. My tires kiss the merge lane, and I breathe easier, convinced I've escaped a prankster. But the CB crackles once more, a whisper threaded with static. "Missed me." I nearly dropped the mic. I check my mirrors and spot a dark pickup exiting the rest area behind me, headlights off. Its outline wavers through rain haze, but I make out a chrome brush guard and an LED light bar on the roof. The kind you'd expect on an off-duty deputy or a highway maintenance truck. The pickup accelerates, closing the gap even as I pull my rig to 65 miles per hour. I call out on 19, southbound I-75. Got a four-wheeler with no lights tailing a combo. Anybody nearby? Silence. The pickup switches on high beams, floods my mirrors, then cuts left into the passing lane, pacing my cab. For the first time, I see the driver. Black ball cap, face shadowed. He rolls his window halfway and flashes that same oversized flashlight, now uncovered. Its beam, bright white, strobes across my dash. Then he edges toward my lane as if to sideswipe me. Reflex kicks in. I jerk right, tires howling along the rumble strip. Horn blares, engine brake rattles. The pickup drops back, merges behind me, and kills its headlights again, leaving only my tail lights to reflect faintly off its grille. I slam the mic. Georgia State, Tennessee Highway Patrol, any unit monitoring? I got an aggressive vehicle mile marker, 154 southbound, trying to box a commercial vehicle. No answer. My phone sits in a dashboard cradle. I stab 911. No bars. Mountain foothills and a cheap carrier. The pickup inches closer until its bumper disappears under my ICC bar. I feather the trailer brake to tap the lights, hoping to spook him with surprise illumination. He swerves left, then accelerates, passing me, this time scraping the flashlight beam along the passenger side trailer wall as if inspecting it. The light pauses on the cargo door handle. Then he hurtles forward, cutting back into the right lane so close the draft rattles my hood mirrors. Up ahead, headlights of an oncoming northbound rig kite through the median trees. Proof I'm not alone on this stretch, but too far to help. I downshift, bringing my speed to 55, trying to keep distance. The pickup stays parallel, matching. Its roof light bar suddenly flashes red-blue strobes, no siren, looking every bit like undercover law. Relief crashes through me. Maybe a plainclothes trooper after all, trying to flag a mechanical issue I missed. I key the mic again. Officer, if that's you, say your unit number. I'll comply. The only response is the light bar switching off, plunging the truck back into darkness. My relief mutates to dread so fast, it makes me dizzy. The pickup slow brakes, falls behind my trailer, then darts right onto the shoulder, where it rides the gravel with uncanny stability. Its driver's side door swings open, and the man in the reflective vest steps out, still moving, jogging alongside the cab while clutching the flashlight like a baton. He slaps the trailer wall twice, bang, bang, then plunges into the tree line, lost in night. I lose sight of the pickup as well. It has veered onto the grassy median, no lights, ghosting through kudzu and saplings. I keep the hammer down, engine roaring at 1,700 RPM, praying nothing's damaged. 10 miles later, the cell signal pops back. I dial 911. This time, it rings. I blurt my mile marker, description, and what just went down. The dispatcher's tone goes clipped professional. We've had similar reports tonight. Troopers are en route. Do not stop your vehicle until you reach the next way station at mile 131. I'm shaking so hard the wheel vibrates. I lock the doors, again, turn every light I have to max, and set cruise at 62. The rain picks up, thunderheads rolling over Chattanooga Valley, sheet lightning illuminating exit signs like strobe photography. Every reflector post looks like the vest man. Every dip in pavement feels like a tire failure. At mile 137, I crest a hill and finally see the way station ahead. Lit up bright as day, green open sign glowing. 2 Tennessee Highway Patrol cruisers sit angled across the ramp, light bars spinning. I pull in, air brakes hissing louder than ever. Troopers direct me into an inspection bay, guns unholstered but pointed down. One motions through my driver window. I kill the engine, hands visible. After a tense minute, they clear me to step out. They run the VIN my CDL, scan the trailer seal, intact. A trooper named Haskins listens while I recount everything. The CB whispers, restroom stall, the figure on the exit lane, the tailless pickup, the slap on the trailer. Haskins' jaw tightens. "We've been hunting a duo pulling this stunt for weeks," he says. "They prey on rookies. One distracts, the other tries to break cargo seals or plant contraband, guns, pills, you name it. So the driver hauls it across state lines, unaware." My stomach plummets. If they'd planted something, I'd be looking at federal time. He gestures to a K-9 team already circling my trailer. After 20 sweat-soaked minutes, the dog indicates nothing. I exhale for the first time since the rest area. Haskins hands back my license. "They pick rest areas with poor camera coverage. Only reason they bailed is you left too quick." He advises filing a full statement at the district post. I agree, though dawn is breaking and my schedule is shot. I phone dispatch. They reslot the delivery, thank heaven, and tell me safety will call. The weigh station mechanic notes 2 fresh gouges in my trailer's aluminum skin, one by the door latch. Under magnification, you can see where someone tried a bolt cutter but slipped, maybe scared off by my quick departure. Proof enough for me. Troopers release me at 5:45 with a case number and a warning to avoid that rest area until further notice. I roll south, sun rising in a smear of peach and gold over Lookout Mountain. But the beauty barely registers. Every time I pass a pickup with a light bar, I tense so hard my shoulders ache. At the consignee in Atlanta, the receiving clerk signs the bills without a glance, clueless to how close his paper stock came to being a mule load for contraband. Back at the company yard that evening, the safety manager interviews me for an hour, makes copies of the trooper report, and installs a forward-facing dashcam upgrade on my ride. "Cost is nothing compared to liability," he mutters. He's right, but security hardware only soothes part of the burn. The real scar is mental. How quickly routine can turn predatory. How fast an isolated rest area stop can spin into a cat-and-mouse nightmare. A week passes before I can sleep in the cab without jolting awake at phantom footsteps. I start parking only at well-lit truck stops, even if it means paying for a reserved space. My CB stays on, but I've learned to trust silence less and vigilance more. Yet every so often, as interstate miles unspool under sodium lights, a voice seeps through the static, sometimes a real driver, sometimes the echo of that raspy whisper. "Come out, big rig boy." And when it does, the wheel gets a little tighter in my grip, and I remember that in the dark, you can never be sure who's out there watching, waiting for your guard to drop just long enough to open a door you never meant to crack. Let's move to our third story. I'm Anna, 55 years old, 28 years behind the wheel of a Kenworth W900 that's seen more miles than most astronauts. Tonight I'm hauling steel coil from Pittsburgh to Spokane, a long pull that'll take me through some of the loneliest stretches in America. The load is valuable. 47,000 pounds of prime rolled steel destined for a fabrication plant outside the city. Dispatch routed me through Interstate 90 with a mandatory stop at Cold Springs Industrial Complex, mile marker 287, just east of Spokane. It's a newer facility, built in what used to be farmland, designed for cross-docking operations where drivers can grab a meal, fuel, and swap trailers if needed. I've been rolling for 11 hours since leaving the Monongahela Valley. My logbook showing I've got 3 hours left on my 14-hour window. The sun died behind the Cascade foothills an hour ago, and now the highway cuts through pine forests so thick they swallow moonlight. My CB picks up the occasional chatter from other night haulers, complaints about construction near Coeur d'Alene, warnings about black ice on Snoqualmie Pass. But mostly, it's just the steady hum of tires on asphalt and the deep growl of the Cummins under my hood. The Cold Springs exit appears in my headlight beams, a plain green sign with white lettering that looks fresh enough to still smell like paint. I downshift, engine brake chattering, and follow the off-ramp to a 2-lane county road that winds through second-growth timber. According to my GPS, the facility is 3 miles ahead. My fuel gauge shows half empty, and the coffee I bought in Missoula has long since gone cold. Perfect timing for a break. The facility emerges from the trees like something out of an industrial planning manual. 3 long, low buildings arranged in a horseshoe around a central yard, with loading docks spaced every 50 feet. Floodlights on 30-foot poles cast harsh white light across the asphalt. But something feels off immediately. The place is deserted. No other trucks, no forklifts moving between buildings, no workers in high-vis vests directing traffic. Just empty concrete and shadows that stretch like black fingers between the light poles. I roll up to the guard shack, a prefab box with tinted windows, and idle while waiting for someone to emerge. Nothing. I tap the horn twice, a polite hello, but the sound just echoes off the warehouse walls and dies. I squint through the guard shack window, but the interior is too dark to make out details. A clipboard hangs from a chain beside the window, its pages fluttering in a breeze I can't feel. I set the parking brake, grab my flashlight, and climb down to investigate. The clipboard holds shipping manifests, but they're all dated 3 weeks ago. The last entry shows a driver named Rodriguez delivering HVAC equipment on a Tuesday afternoon. Below that, nothing but blank pages. I shine the light through the guard shack window and see an empty chair, a coffee mug with a coating of green mold, and a desktop computer with a black screen. Wherever the guard went, he's been gone a while. Back in the cab, I pull up the facility information on my fleet management system. Cold Springs Industrial Complex, fully operational, 24-hour receiving. The contact number connects me to a voicemail system that plays smooth jazz for 30 seconds before cutting to dead air. I try the emergency number listed on my bills of lading. Same result. My satellite communication unit shows full signal strength, so the problem isn't on my end. I consider leaving, driving back to the interstate and calling dispatch to report the facility closed. But my delivery window is tight, and this is the designated cross-dock point. If I miss it, the steel could sit on my trailer for days while logistics sorts out an alternative. That means detention pay disputes, late delivery penalties, and a black mark on my safety rating. Sometimes you push forward because the alternatives are worse. I ease the Kenworth through the open gate and follow yellow-painted arrows to Dock 7, where my paperwork says to unload. The loading dock stretches like a concrete platform, raised 4 feet above ground level, with heavy-duty bumper pads and dock levelers. Everything looks normal, except for the silence. Even automated facilities have noise. Conveyor belts, ventilation fans, backup alarms from electric forklifts. Here, the only sound is my engine cooling and the faint whistle of wind threading through the building's eaves. I back up to the dock, watching my mirrors as the trailer's rear doors align with the loading bay. The moment I set the brakes, the dock door slams down behind me with a metallic crash that echoes through the complex like a gunshot. My heart hammers against my ribs. Dock doors don't fall on their own. They're hydraulic, controlled by switches inside the warehouse. Someone just trapped me. I grab the CB mic and key up on channel 19. Breaker 19, emergency at Cold Springs Industrial, mile marker 287 eastbound I-90. Driver trapped at loading dock, need immediate assistance. Static answers. I try the emergency channel, then the company frequency. Nothing but white noise. My cell phone shows no bars, not unusual in rural Washington, but the timing feels deliberate. The Kenworth's air brakes hiss as I release them, planning to pull forward and escape through the yard. But when I shift into drive and give it throttle, the truck lurches forward only a few inches before grinding to a halt. I try again, same result. I set the parking brake and climb out to investigate. In the harsh dock lighting, I see the problem. Someone has chained my trailer's landing gear to a concrete anchor point embedded in the dock. Heavy logging chain, the kind used to secure bulldozers to lowboy trailers. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Panic claws at my throat. But 28 years on the road have taught me to think through problems methodically. I circle the trailer, looking for any other restraints. The chain is the only visible problem, secured with a padlock that looks military grade. My bolt cutter's back in the toolbox might work, but it'll take time. First priority is communication. I climb back into the cab and try the satellite emergency beacon, the one that supposedly works anywhere on Earth. The indicator light flashes amber, then red. No satellite acquisition. That's when I hear the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing from inside the warehouse behind the closed dock door. Boot heels on concrete, approaching from deep inside the building. I grab the tire iron from under my seat and slide out of the cab, staying low. The footsteps pause, then resume, closer now. A shadow moves behind the frosted glass panels set into the dock door. A human silhouette, tall and thin, carrying something in one hand. "Security," I call out, trying to sound authoritative rather than terrified. "I'm a commercial driver with a scheduled delivery. Open the dock door." The footsteps stop. After a moment, they resume. But now they're moving away, fading into the warehouse's interior. I wait for 5 minutes, listening to nothing but my own breathing and the tick of cooling metal. Then the footsteps return, accompanied by a new sound, the screech of metal on concrete, like someone dragging a heavy object across the floor. I shine my flashlight through the glass panels, but the warehouse interior is a maze of shadows. Pallets stacked to the ceiling, aisles that disappear into darkness, overhead cranes hanging motionless like mechanical vultures. The dragging sound stops directly behind the dock door. Then, silence so complete it makes my ears ring. My hands shake as I walk back to the chain securing my trailer. The padlock is massive, but the bolt cutters might work if I can get the right angle. I retrieve them from the toolbox and position the jaws around the lock's shackle. The metal resists, but after 3 attempts, the shackle snaps with a ping that sounds like a rifle shot in the quiet night. The chain slithers to the concrete with a crash. I'm running for the cab when the warehouse lights begin switching on in sequence. First the loading area directly behind me, then bay after bay stretching into the building's depths. In the harsh fluorescent glare, I catch glimpses of what's inside. Empty pallets, abandoned forklifts, and in the far corner, a pile of what looks like discarded clothing. But it's the wrong shape, wrong color. My mind refuses to process the details, but my gut knows terror when it sees it. The dock door behind me groans upward, hydraulics whining. I don't look back. I vault into the cab, fire the engine, and floor the accelerator. The Kenworth lurches forward, tires screaming against concrete, trailers swaying as I take the turn out of the loading area at twice the safe speed. In my mirrors, I see a figure standing in the open dock. Doorway, tall, wearing coveralls, motionless as a scarecrow. Then the building lights cut out all at once, plunging the complex back into darkness. I don't slow down until I'm back on I-90, westbound toward Spokane. my hands welded to the steering wheel and my breath coming in ragged gasps. At the first truck stop, I pull into the brightest parking spot I can find and call 911. The dispatcher sounds skeptical. Industrial facilities close early, she explains, and trespassing calls are low priority unless there's evidence of theft or damage. I insist she send someone anyway and give her the exact location. An hour later, my phone rings. It's a Spokane County deputy named Martinez. He's been to Cold Springs. Facility's been closed for renovation since last month, he tells me. No security guard, no active operations. You sure you had the right address? I read him the delivery instructions word for word. He sighs. Probably a paperwork error. These logistics companies mix up addresses all the time. Your dispatcher can sort it out tomorrow. But when I call dispatch at dawn, they insist Cold Springs Industrial is operational and my delivery was confirmed. They have emails, phone logs, GPS coordinates. Everything points to the facility being open for business. Yet when I describe what happened, the dispatching manager goes quiet for a long moment. Anna, he finally says, we've had 3 drivers report problems at that location in the past month. Equipment failures, communication issues, general bad vibes. We're pulling it from the rotation pending investigation. I ask what kind of problems. He won't specify, but mentions that one driver, a veteran named Thompson, refused to complete his delivery there and drove straight to the customer's alternative facility. When pressed for details, Thompson would only say the place felt wrong and that he saw things that didn't make sense. The company marked it down as driver fatigue and mandatory counseling. 3 days later, I'm delivering a different load to a fabrication plant 20 miles from Cold Springs. During a lunch break, I strike up a conversation with a local sheriff's deputy eating at the same diner. When I mention Cold Springs Industrial, his expression hardens. We've had issues there, he admits after glancing around the restaurant. Missing persons reports, strange calls. Problem is, the place changes ownership every 6 months. Shell companies, out-of-state LLCs. By the time we investigate complaints, the previous owners have vanished and new ones claim no knowledge of problems. He leans across the table, voice dropping to a whisper. Between you and me, we think it's being used for human trafficking. Way station for moving people across state lines. Most drivers who stop there see nothing because the operation only runs certain nights. But the ones who arrive at the wrong time. He shrugs, leaving the sentence unfinished. I ask if they've raided the place. He shakes his head. No probable cause. Just a bunch of commercial drivers with scary stories and no evidence. You can't get a warrant based on bad feelings. But then he hands me his card. You ever go back there, you call me direct. Don't wait for 911 to route the call. I never did return to Cold Springs Industrial. My company stopped routing loads through that facility entirely after Thompson filed a formal complaint alleging safety violations. But sometimes, when I'm hauling through eastern Washington late at night, I'll catch myself looking for that exit sign at mile marker 287. It's still there, green and reflective, directing traffic to a place that exists on maps and GPS systems, but feels like a wound in the landscape itself. The steel coil I was supposed to deliver that night eventually made it to the customer through a different facility. 3 days late and with a story nobody wanted to believe. The fabrication plant's receiving manager just shrugged when I explained the delay. Happens all the time with Cold Springs, he said. They're either closed when they should be open or open when they should be closed. We stopped scheduling deliveries there months ago, but logistics keeps sending drivers anyway. Some kind of computer glitch nobody can fix. Computer glitch. maybe that's all it was. A database error that sent drivers to a shuttered facility, bad cell coverage that killed communications, and coincidental timing that made everything feel sinister. But I remember the footsteps echoing through that warehouse, the deliberate way someone chained my trailer to the dock, and the pile of discarded clothing that wasn't clothing at all. Some places collect darkness the way others collect dust, and Cold Springs Industrial feels like one of them. A facility that exists in the gray zone between legitimate business and something far worse. Feeding on drivers who arrive at exactly the wrong moment and can't prove what they saw in the morning light. Let's move to our fourth story. I'm Luis Guerrero, 34 years old, ex-Marine with 2 tours in Afghanistan under my belt, and I've been driving a 2019 Volvo Venel 860 for 3 years now. Tonight, I'm hauling auto parts from Detroit to Denver. Transmission assemblies, brake rotors, the kind of precision-manufactured components that keep America's automotive industry humming. The load is worth more than my house, secured in a climate-controlled trailer that cost the company 6 figures. My route takes me through Interstate 70 West, cutting straight through the heart of Colorado's Rockies, and dispatch wants me in Denver by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. It's February 15th, and the Weather Channel has been screaming about a massive winter storm system moving down from Canada. But the forecast showed it tracking north of my route. Clear skies, they said. Temperatures dropping to single digits, but no precipitation expected until I'm safely parked at the consignee. That was 6 hours ago, when I left the auto plant in suburban Detroit under a canopy of stars so bright they looked like holes punched in black velvet. Now, climbing through the Eisenhower Tunnel approach at 10,800 feet above sea level. Those stars have vanished behind a wall of clouds thick as concrete. The first snowflakes hit my windshield just past Silverthorne, fat and lazy, melting instantly on the heated glass. I've driven through plenty of mountain weather. Nothing in Colorado compares to the sandstorms and IED craters of Helmand Province. So I dial back my speed to 55 and keep climbing. The Volvo's engine breathes hard in the thin air, turbo working overtime, exhaust visible in the headlight beams like dragon's breath. My CB crackles with chatter from other drivers. Eastbound, how's it looking over Vail Pass? Slushy but manageable, driver. Keep your intervals. By Glenwood Canyon, the snow is falling sideways, driven by winds that howl through the rock formations like artillery shells. My GPS shows 127 miles to Denver, but I'm only making 35 miles per hour now, following the twin red smears of taillights from a refrigerated unit hauling produce. Behind me, headlights of another truck maintain perfect distance. Probably an experienced mountain driver who knows better than to tailgate on black ice. The canyon walls rise on both sides, like the ramparts of some ancient fortress. And for a moment, I'm transported back to the Hindu Kush, convoying through passes where Taliban snipers waited in caves above the roadway. The memory dissolves when my trailer slides left on a gentle curve, weight shifting despite the load being properly distributed. I ease off the throttle, feel the Volvo's stability control system pulse the brakes to regain traction. The reefer ahead of me has activated his flashers, universal signal for hazardous conditions. I match him, amber lights painting the swirling snow like a strobe light. My fuel gauge shows 3/4 full, plenty to reach Denver, but the storm is intensifying faster than any forecast predicted. At exit 116, the chain-up area appears through the blizzard, a flat pullout where trucks can install tire chains before tackling the steepest grades. But as I ease toward the ramp, I see it's completely blocked by jackknife trailers and abandoned vehicles. A Colorado State Patrol cruiser sits at an angle, light bar spinning, but no trooper is visible. The officer is probably helping stranded motorists or directing traffic at another choke point. I key up the CB. Eastbound, anybody got eyes on chain-up conditions at 116? Static answers, punctuated by the occasional broken transmission. Closed ahead. No through traffic. Seek shelter. The words chill me more than the sub-zero air. I've been monitoring weather reports all evening, and nothing indicated road closures. But mountain weather changes faster than tactical situations, and sometimes you find yourself cut off from friendly forces with no alternative but to dig in and wait for extraction. I downshift to fourth gear and push west, hoping to find an open truck stop or at least a wide shoulder where I can ride out the worst of it. That's when I see the overturned tanker. It's lying on its side in the median between eastbound and westbound lanes, a massive aluminum cylinder gleaming dully in my headlights. The tractor is nowhere visible, probably rolled down the embankment or been pulled away by emergency crews. But the tanker trailer sits abandoned like a beached whale. Placards on its sides, too snow-covered to read. No flares, no warning lights, no emergency vehicles attending the scene. Just a 10,000-gallon hazmat container sitting unguarded in a blizzard. I pull onto the shoulder, hazards flashing, and grab my flashlight and emergency radio. Military training kicks in. Assess the situation, identify threats, establish communications. I trudge through knee-deep snow toward the tanker, each step crunching through a crust that immediately fills with fresh powder. The wind cuts through my insulated coveralls like razor wire, and I can feel my beard collecting ice crystals with each exhaled breath. The tanker is maybe 50 yards away, but it feels like crossing a minefield in slow motion. As I get closer, details emerge from the snow and darkness. The tanker is relatively new, maybe 5 years old, with DOT numbers still visible through the accumulating ice. The trailer's running lights are dark, no electrical connection to power them. More troubling, there's no evidence of a rollover. No gouged earth, no debris field, no skid marks. It's as if someone simply set the tanker on its side in the median and walked away. I circle the tank, looking for placards or shipping papers that might identify the contents. The mandatory hazmat diamonds are covered with ice, but I scrape away enough snow to reveal a 3 classification, flammable liquid. Could be gasoline, diesel, industrial solvent, dozens of possibilities. What matters is that a ruptured tank this size could contaminate groundwater for miles or create a vapor cloud that would turn the interstate into a fireball if ignited. That's when I hear the tapping. Faint, rhythmic, metal on metal, coming from inside the tanker. I press my ear against the aluminum skin and listen. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS in Morse code. The universal distress signal every Marine learns in basic training. Someone is alive inside that tank. "Hello," I shout, pounding on the tanker wall with my flashlight. "Can you hear me?" The tapping stops, then resumes more frantically. Definitely human, definitely in distress. I key up my handheld radio on the emergency frequency. Any station. Any station. This is a commercial driver at mile marker 119 westbound, André 70. I have a hazmat situation with possible persons trapped. Immediate emergency response required. Static answers. I try my satellite emergency beacon, the expensive one that's supposed to reach rescue services anywhere on Earth. The unit powers up, searches for satellites, then displays no signal acquired. The tapping continues, weaker now, as if whoever's inside is running out of strength. I examine the tanker's access points, a manhatch on top, secured by a heavy dog latch mechanism, and a bottom drain valve that would require tools I don't have. The manhatch is my only option, but it's 8 feet off the ground with the tanker on its side and coated with ice that makes climbing treacherous. I trudge back to my Volvo and retrieve a tow strap, tire iron, and emergency flares. If there are people trapped inside, hypothermia will kill them long before rescue crews can navigate the blocked roads. I tie one end of the strap to my trailer's tow point and use it to climb up the tanker's slippery surface, boots slipping on the ice-covered aluminum. 3 times I slide back to the snow, cursing like the grunt I used to be. On the 4th attempt, I make it to the top and work the manhatch's locking mechanism. The hatch won't budge. Corrosion, ice, or both have frozen the mechanism solid. I position the tire iron for leverage and throw my full weight against it. Metal screams against metal, but the hatch holds. From inside the tank, the tapping becomes desperate. No longer rhythmic SOS, just frantic hammering against the walls. Whoever's in there knows I'm trying to help and is running out of time. I light 2 emergency flares and set them beside the manhatch, hoping the heat will expand the metal enough to break the ice seal. Red light paints the falling snow like drops of blood. And for a moment I'm back in Afghanistan, watching illumination rounds drift over a village where insurgents held American hostages. Same desperation, same race against time, same sickening certainty that good people were dying while I struggled with equipment that wouldn't cooperate. The flares burned for 15 minutes before finally melting enough ice for the hatch mechanism to turn. The heavy steel cover lifts with a groan, releasing a cloud of vapor that reeks of industrial solvent. Definitely not gasoline, something more volatile. I shine my flashlight into the tank's interior, expecting to see survivors clinging to internal baffles or floating in liquid. The tank is empty. Bone dry, not even residual fumes. The tapping stops the moment the hatch opens, and my light reveals smooth aluminum walls with no handholds, no places for a person to hide or survive. But the sound was real. I heard it, felt it through the tank walls, responded to its desperate rhythm. Marine training doesn't prepare you for mysteries that violate the laws of physics. I'm still staring into the empty tank when headlights sweep across me from the roadway. A Colorado State Patrol SUV has pulled up beside my Volvo, light bar flashing through the snow. I climb down as the trooper approaches, a compact woman in her 40s, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who's worked mountain highways for decades. "You the driver who called in a hazmat situation?" she asks, shouting over the wind. I nod and explain what I found: the overturned tanker, the SOS tapping, the empty interior. Her expression grows increasingly skeptical as I talk. When I finish, she shines her own flashlight at the tanker and shakes her head. "Driver, this trailer's been here 3 weeks," she says. "Rolled off the road during that ice storm Valentine's Day weekend. We've been waiting for the environmental contractor to drain and remove it. But the access road's been snowed out. Nothing in that tank but air and maybe some residual vapors." I insist on what I heard, demonstrate the SOS pattern by tapping it out on her patrol car's hood. She listens patiently, then explains: thermal expansion and contraction. Empty tanks make all kinds of noise when temperatures fluctuate. Metal pops, settles, sounds like Morse code if you're listening for patterns. Happens all the time with abandoned equipment. Her explanation makes scientific sense, but it doesn't account for the timing. Why the tapping started exactly when I approached, why it responded to my movements, why it stopped the instant I opened the hatch. I mention these details, but she's already walking back toward her SUV. "Storm's getting worse," she calls over her shoulder. "Roads closing in both directions past Georgetown. You need to turn around and seek shelter in Glenwood Springs. No through traffic until morning. I want to argue. But military experience taught me when to follow orders from higher authority. I secure the tanker's man hatch, collect my equipment, and trudge back to the Volvo through snow that's now falling so hard it's like walking through a white curtain. As I fire up the engine and begin the slow U-turn process, my headlights sweep across the tanker one final time. For just a moment, I could swear I see handprints pressed against the aluminum skin from the inside. 5-fingered impressions, visible only in the angled light, as if someone were trapped within and desperately trying to signal for help. But when I stop and shine my flashlight directly at the spot, there's nothing but smooth metal and accumulated snow. The drive back to Glenwood Springs takes 2 hours through white-knuckle conditions that would have challenged a tracked vehicle. I find a parking space at a truck stop that's already packed with stranded drivers, all of us waiting for dawn and snowplows to reopen the interstate. In the restaurant, conversation revolves around the storm, how fast it intensified, how far behind schedule everyone will be, whether the company will pay detention for weather delays. I don't mention the tanker or the sounds I heard. Military service teaches you that some experiences don't translate to civilian conversation, that certain truths sound like delusions when stripped of their context. But I can't shake the memory of that rhythmic tapping. The desperate precision of SOS transmitted through aluminum walls, the handprints that existed only in peripheral vision. The next morning, the interstate reopens under crystalline blue skies that make the previous night feel like a fever dream. I complete my delivery to Denver 3 hours late, well within acceptable weather delays, and file a routine trip report that mentions extreme conditions and emergency stop for hazmat assessment. Nothing about phantom SOS signals or impossible handprints. 2 weeks later, I'm hauling electronics back through the same stretch of I-70. The abandoned tanker is gone, removed by environmental contractors, according to a road crew I ask. But at mile marker 119, where the median still shows faint scorch marks from my emergency flares, I slow down and listen. The Volvo's engine hums, snow chains sing against asphalt, and the CB crackles with normal driver chatter. But underneath it all, if I strain my ears and let my imagination wander, I can almost hear it. A faint tapping, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, transmitted through the mountain air like an echo from another dimension. Maybe it's wind through the canyon walls, maybe thermal expansion of guardrails, maybe the sound of my own heartbeat amplified by altitude and memory. Or maybe, in the thin air and infinite silence of the Colorado Rockies, some distress signals never stop broadcasting, regardless of whether anyone's left alive to send them. Let's move to our 5th story. I'm Maya Rodriguez, 2nd-generation Mexican-American, 29 years old, and I've been driving a 2020 Kenworth T680 for barely 8 months. My grandfather hauled produce from California's Central Valley back when discrimination meant you couldn't even fuel up at certain truck stops. And my father drove furniture coast to coast for 30 years before his back gave out. Trucking's in my blood. But tonight, I'm questioning whether I'm cut out for this life. I'm westbound on Route 66 through Arizona's high desert, hauling refrigerated produce from Phoenix to Flagstaff. Lettuce, strawberries, avocados destined for resort restaurants that charge $20 for a salad. The load's worth maybe $8,000. But losing it would cost me my job and probably blacklist me from every produce company in the Southwest. It's August 3rd. Temperature gauge reading 117 degrees Fahrenheit, even though the sun dropped behind the San Francisco peaks an hour ago. The desert holds heat like a cast-iron skillet, radiating up through the asphalt and making the air shimmer even in darkness. My reefer unit is working overtime, chattering like a diesel-powered air conditioner. but the produce is holding steady at 34 degrees Fahrenheit. I've got 127 miles to Flagstaff and a 6 a.m. delivery window that won't tolerate delays. Route 66 through this stretch is 2-lane blacktop with no services, no cell towers, just endless sagebrush and the occasional roadkill baking on the shoulder. Around mile marker 198, my headlights pick up something in the road ahead. A dark shape sprawled across the center line. I downshift, engine brake growling, and slow from 65 to 40. As I get closer, the shape resolves into a big rig, a day cab pulling a flatbed loaded with construction equipment. The truck is jackknifed across both lanes, completely blocking the highway. No flares, no warning triangles, no emergency flashers. Just a disabled truck sitting in the dark like a roadblock. I stop 50 yards short and set my hazards flashing. The CB crackles with static but no chatter, unusual for a major route, even at night. I key up on channel 19. Eastbound route 66 mile marker 198. We got a disabled unit blocking both lanes. Driver, if you copy, what's your situation? Silence answers. I try again on channel 9, the emergency frequency. Any station monitoring, commercial vehicle blocking route 66 eastbound, driver possibly needs assistance. Nothing but white noise and the distant hum of my reefer unit. I grab my flashlight and climb down, leaving the engine running and doors unlocked, a habit my father drilled into me after 30 years of roadside encounters. The desert air hits like opening an oven door, dry and scorching even at 10:30 p.m. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote yips once and falls silent. My boots crunch on gravel as I approach the jackknifed truck, flashlight beam dancing across chrome bumpers and mud flaps decorated with silhouettes of naked women. The day cab is a 2015 Freightliner Cascadia, Arizona plates, company logos too faded to read in the poor light. The driver's door hangs open, interior dome light casting a weak yellow glow. I call out, "Driver, you okay in there?" No response. I ease closer, combat boots my father bought me for Christmas crunching on broken glass from the passenger window. The windshield is spider-webbed but intact, suggesting impact rather than rollover. But there's no debris field, no skid marks, no evidence of what caused the jackknife. The cab is empty. Driver's seat adjusted for someone about my height, logbook open on the dashboard, thermos of coffee still warm in the cup holder. The pages show a driver named Peterson hauling rebar from Tucson to Las Vegas, behind schedule but legal on hours. His signature from the last fuel stop is barely 3 hours old. The passenger seat holds a road atlas, cell phone charger, and a gas station receipt time-stamped 1947, 90 minutes ago. Wherever Peterson went, he abandoned his truck recently and in apparent haste. I circle the flatbed trailer, checking straps and inspecting the load. 20 tons of steel rebar, properly secured, no shifting or damage. The trailer's marker lights are dark, electrical connection severed when the unit jackknifed. But the rebar itself tells a story. Several pieces have been removed from the top layer, leaving gaps in the otherwise orderly arrangement. Heavy steel, each piece weighing hundreds of pounds, moved by hand in 100-degree heat. Why would anyone steal rebar in the middle of the desert? That's when I hear the voice, faint, muffled, coming from somewhere ahead in the darkness. "Help. Help me." A man's voice, barely audible over the desert wind. I follow the sound. Flashlight beam sweeping across creosote bushes and barrel cactus. The voice comes again, clearer now. "Over here. Can't move." 20 yards from the disabled truck, my light catches movement behind a cluster of shawla cactus. A figure lies on the ground, waving weakly. I approach cautiously, hand on the knife clipped to my belt, another gift from my father, who taught me that roadside assistance could turn predatory without warning. The man on the ground appears to be in his 50s, wearing jeans and a plaid shirt soaked with sweat. His face is sunburned and dusty, lips cracked from dehydration. "Thank God," he gasps when my light hits him. "Thought I was going to die out here." "You Peterson?" I ask, keeping my distance. He nods, struggling to sit up. "Truck broke down, tried to walk for help. Got turned around in the dark, been wandering for hours." His story makes sense. Desert disorientation is common, and the nearest services are 30 miles in either direction. But something feels off. His clothes are dirty but not torn, boots barely scuffed for someone who's been stumbling through cactus and rocks. And his truck is clearly visible from where he's lying, its marker lights casting amber reflections off the highway. "What happened to your rig?" I ask, offering him my water bottle. He drinks greedily, spilling half down his shirt. "Lost power steering coming around a curve. Jackknifed trying to keep it on the road. Lucky I didn't roll it." He gestures toward the truck with a shaking hand. "Radio's dead. Phone's got no signal. Been stranded since sunset." I help him stand, noting that he's steadier on his feet than someone suffering genuine heat exhaustion should be. "My truck's got satellite communication," I tell him. "We can call for a wrecker, get you sorted out." He grins, showing teeth too white for a veteran driver. "Appreciate it, miss. You're a lifesaver." We walk back toward my Kenworth, Peterson leaning on my arm but not putting much weight on it. As we pass his disabled truck, I notice details that didn't register before. The fuel tanks are full, gauges visible through the open door. The engine isn't steaming or smoking, no evidence of mechanical failure. Most telling, the trailer landing gear is down, supporting the front of the flatbed. You don't drop landing gear during an emergency jackknife. You do it when you're deliberately unhooking from the trailer. "Peterson," I say, stopping beside his cab, "why'd you unhook from your trailer?" He blinks, confusion flickering across his features. "What? I didn't. The impact must have..." He trails off, realizing his mistake. The fifth wheel release handle is clearly visible in the cab, pulled to the disconnected position. No impact causes that, only deliberate action by the driver. I back away, hand drifting toward my knife. What's really going on here? Peterson's demeanor shifts instantly, the helpless dehydration act dropping like a discarded mask. He straightens, no longer leaning or stumbling, and his voice loses the desperate edge. "Smart girl," he says, almost admiringly. "Too smart for your own good." That's when I hear engines. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east, headlights still below the horizon, but growing brighter. Peterson grins and keys a handheld radio I hadn't noticed clipped to his belt. "Package inbound," he says into the device. "One driver, female, probably armed. Standard intercept protocol." My blood turns to ice water despite the desert heat. This isn't a breakdown, it's an ambush. The disabled truck is bait, Peterson the lure, and I've walked straight into a cargo theft operation that's probably been running this route for months. The approaching vehicles are the muscle coming to transfer my load and dispose of any witnesses. I think of my grandfather's stories about the old days, when hijackers would strand drivers in the desert and steal entire rigs. Some of those drivers were never found. I run. Not toward my truck, that's what they expect, but into the desert, flashlight off, hoping darkness will hide me until I can circle back or find help. Behind me, Peterson shouts instructions to the radio. Southbound into the brush, maybe 50 yards out. She's got a light, but she's running dark now. Headlights sweep the highway as 3 vehicles arrive. 2 pickup trucks and a semi-truck, probably stolen, ready to take my refrigerated load. The desert floor is treacherous in darkness, every step a gamble between solid ground and hidden obstacles. Chala cactus catches my jeans, thorns like fishhooks tearing fabric and skin. Rocks turn under my boots, threatening to snap an ankle. But I keep moving, using sound to navigate. Voices from the highway growing fainter, engine noise spreading as they begin their search. 20 minutes into my flight, I'm lost. The highway lights have disappeared behind low hills, and the desert stretches endlessly in every direction. My water bottle is back at the truck, and the temperature is still above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Without shelter or navigation, I have maybe 6 hours before dehydration becomes life-threatening. But stopping means capture, and capture means disappearing into the vast emptiness that swallows inconvenient witnesses. I climb a rocky outcrop, hoping for a view back to the highway. From the crest, I can see the glow of headlights, maybe a mile away. My truck surrounded by the hijackers' vehicles. They're transferring the load, probably to refrigerated containers in their semi. Professional operation, efficient and practiced. In an hour, they'll be gone, leaving only Peterson's abandoned day cab and questions no one will ask, because missing produce drivers are just another casualty of a dangerous profession. That's when I spot the second set of lights, approaching from the west, still distant but moving fast. Single vehicle, traveling the speed limit, probably a legitimate traveler who doesn't know they're driving into an active crime scene. I pull out my cell phone, praying for even 1 bar of signal. Nothing. But the phone's LED flashlight still works. I cover the lens with my fingers, creating a dim red glow, and begin signaling SOS toward the approaching vehicle. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short repeated until my thumb cramps. The westbound vehicle slows, then stops. Through the desert air, I hear a diesel engine. Another trucker, probably wondering about the activity ahead. Perfect. Truckers monitor CB radios religiously, and even these hijackers won't risk attacking another big rig with a driver who can radio for help. I scramble down the outcrop, heading toward the sound, using every landmark I can memorize to navigate in the darkness. 15 minutes later, I emerge from the brush line 50 yards from an idling Peterbilt with Montana plates. The driver, a weathered man in his 60s, is standing beside his cab with binoculars, studying the scene ahead. I approach slowly, hands visible, calling out before I get close enough to seem threatening. "Driver, I need help. There's a hijacking in progress up ahead." He lowers the binoculars and studies me. Torn jeans, cactus thorns, dust-caked and exhausted, but obviously not a threat. "You the driver of that reefer? Driver of that unit?" I nod and quickly explain. The disabled truck, Peterson's deception, the arriving vehicles. He listens without interruption, then pulls out a satellite phone. "Montana DOT dispatch. This is Unit 447. I need immediate highway patrol response, Route 66, eastbound mile marker 198. Armed hijacking in progress. Drivers safe, but stranded." The response is swift and professional. Arizona Highway Patrol has had reports of cargo theft along this stretch, and they've been running surveillance operations. Unmarked units are already positioning for intercept, and the Montana driver's call provides real-time intelligence they need to move. He keeps me behind his truck while we wait, sharing water and updating dispatch on the hijackers' movements. 20 minutes later, the desert explodes with red and blue lights as state police close in from multiple directions. The hijackers' vehicles scatter, but there's nowhere to run on empty highway with air support vectoring ground units toward any movement. 2 pickups are stopped within minutes, drivers arrested at gunpoint. The stolen semi abandons my trailer and flees cross-country. But helicopter thermal imaging tracks it to a wash where the driver surrenders rather than risk rolling in soft sand. Peterson is long gone, vanished into the brush when the first police lights appeared. But the two hijackers in custody provide enough information to break up a theft ring that's been hitting Route 66 for 8 months. They pose as stranded drivers, use fake disabled trucks as bait, then transfer stolen loads to refrigerated containers for transport to Mexico. Simple, effective, and profitable, until they targeted a driver smart enough to recognize the setup. My Kenworth and its load are recovered intact, the produce still cold, delivery schedule salvageable with an early morning push to Flagstaff. The Arizona troopers take my statement roadside, praising the quick thinking that saved both cargo and life. The Montana driver refuses any reward, saying highway justice is payment enough. But I get his name and company information. Some favors deserve remembering. Dawn breaks over the San Francisco peaks as I finally roll into Flagstaff. 6 hours late, but alive, and with cargo intact. The resort's receiving manager grumbles about the delay until I mention the hijacking attempt. Then his attitude shifts to something between respect and amazement. You fought off cargo thieves and saved the load? Lady, you're harder than the rebar they were trying to steal. Maybe I am. Maybe trucking really is in my blood, passed down through generations of drivers who refuse to let criminals turn America's highways into hunting grounds. Or maybe I just got lucky, stumbled into a trap, but found the courage to fight my way out. Either way, when I call my father that evening to report the incident, there's pride in his voice that makes every cactus thorn and sleepless hour worthwhile. Mija, he says, using the childhood nickname I thought I'd outgrown. Your grandfather would be proud. The road tests everyone sooner or later. Sounds like you passed with honors. I think he's right. But I also think I'll be checking my mirrors more carefully, trusting strangers less readily, and keeping that knife sharp enough to cut more than just cargo straps. Because the desert taught me something my father's stories never quite conveyed. Out here, the difference between hero and victim often comes down to recognizing danger before it recognizes you. Let's move to our sixth story. I'm Frank Rodriguez, 48 years old, been driving big rigs for 22 years, and I thought I'd seen everything the road could throw at me. Tonight, I'm piloting a 2018 Freightliner Coronado through the industrial maze of the port of Long Beach, hauling a load of electronics from Samsung's distribution center to a retail hub in Phoenix. The cargo manifest lists flat-screen TVs, smartphones, tablets, the kind of high-value freight that makes hijackers salivate and insurance companies nervous. My trailer is sealed with tamper-evident locks, GPS-tracked, and worth more than most people's houses. It's 2:30 on a Tuesday morning in September, the dead zone when legitimate commerce sleeps, but the port never truly rests. Container ships from Asia dock at all hours, their cargo flowing through the complex like digital blood through silicon veins. My delivery window opens at 8 a.m. in Phoenix, giving me exactly enough time to clear the port, fuel up, and make the desert run before traffic strangles the freeways. The night air carries the metallic tang of diesel exhaust, salt spray from the Pacific, and that indefinable industrial smell of money-changing hands in the darkness. I roll through the port's main gate, presenting my TWIC card to a security guard who barely glances at my credentials before waving me through. The facility sprawls across thousands of acres, a geometric forest of shipping containers stacked 6 high. Their corrugated walls painted in company colors: Evergreen, Costco, Maersk. Overhead cranes move like mechanical dinosaurs, their spotlights cutting through morning fog that rolls in from the ocean. My GPS guides me through the labyrinth of service roads toward Building 47, where Samsung stages outbound electronics for ground transport. The building materializes from the industrial haze like a concrete cathedral, 5 stories of reinforced steel and glass, with loading docks spaced every 50 feet along its quarter-mile length. Floodlights on 100-foot poles turn night into harsh, artificial day. But somehow the shadows between the light pools seem deeper, more absolute. I count maybe a dozen other trucks at various docks, their drivers either sleeping in their cabs or standing around the coffee truck that parks here every night, selling burnt espresso and stale donuts to anyone with $5 and insomnia. I back into Dock 23 as directed by my fleet management system, watching my mirrors as the trailer's rear doors align with the loading bay. The dock workers should be waiting. Samsung runs a tight schedule, and delayed electronics shipments cost serious money. But when I set the parking brake and climb down, the loading area is deserted. No forklifts, no workers in high-vis vests, no supervisor with a clipboard checking off deliveries. Just empty concrete and the distant hum of machinery from other parts of the building. I walk to the dock office, a prefab structure attached to the main building like a parasitic growth. Through the window, I can see computer monitors glowing blue, but no one sits at the desks. A coffee maker gurgles in the corner, fresh pot maybe 20 minutes old. Someone was here recently, but vanished without explanation. I try the door handle. Locked. Standard security protocol. But it means I'm stuck waiting for someone to show up and process my delivery. Back at the truck, I grab my logbook and cell phone, planning to call dispatch and report the delay. That's when I notice the graffiti. Fresh spray paint on the concrete wall beside Dock 23, still wet enough to reflect the floodlights. Watched, in block letters 3 feet tall. Below it, smaller text that makes my blood run cold. They know what you carry. The paint is electric blue, the kind that glows under ultraviolet light, and it wasn't there 20 minutes ago when I backed in. I spin around, scanning the loading area for any sign of the vandal. Nothing moves except shadows cast by overhead cranes and the occasional seagull picking through trash bins. But the sensation of being observed crawls across my shoulders like spider legs. 22 years of night driving have taught me to trust that feeling. The primitive awareness that kept our ancestors alive when predators stalked in darkness. Someone is watching, and they want me to know it. My CB radio crackles with static, then a voice breaks through. Building 47, Dock 23, you're in the wrong place. No call sign, no identification, just a flat statement delivered in the monotone of someone reading from a script. I key up the mic. This is my assigned dock per dispatch. Who am I talking to? Silence answers. I try again. Unknown station, identify yourself and your location. The radio remains dead, except for the occasional burst of static. I call Samsung's night dispatch number, listed on my delivery papers. The phone rings 8 times before connecting to a voicemail system that plays synthesized music for 30 seconds, then cuts to dead air. I try the Port Authority's emergency line, same result. My satellite communication unit shows full signal strength, so the problem is an equipment failure. It's as if someone has severed all my communication links, isolating me in this concrete and steel maze. That's when the trailer doors open. Not a violent slam or the screech of forced entry, just the quiet click of locks disengaging and hinges rotating on well-oiled pins. I hear it clearly over the ambient noise of the port, that distinctive sound every trucker knows by heart. Someone has accessed my trailer from inside the building, probably through a dock door that connects to the loading bay. But my trailer was sealed when I arrived. Tamper-evident locks intact, GPS tracking showing no unauthorized access. I grab my flashlight and circle to the back of the trailer, heart hammering against my ribs. Both rear doors hang open, revealing the cargo space beyond. My load of electronics sits, undisturbed. Pallets of Samsung boxes secured with load bars and cargo straps. Everything exactly as it was loaded 6 hours ago in the distribution center. But in the center of the trailer, where no pallet should be, sits a wooden crate about the size of a coffin. The crate is ancient, rough lumber weathered to the color of dried blood, held together with iron straps that have rusted nearly through. Stenciled on the lid in faded black paint are Chinese characters I can't read, and below them, English words that make my mouth go dry. Keep out, customs sealed, hazardous materials. The customs seal is genuine government issue, but the date stamped on the metal shows 1987, 36 years old. I've hauled enough international freight to recognize the signs of smuggling. Someone has used my legitimate electronics shipment as cover for moving contraband, probably slipping the crate into my trailer while I was distracted by the missing dock workers. The old customs seal suggests this cargo has been moving through the system for decades, passed from truck to truck like a deadly game of musical chairs. Whatever's inside that crate, it's worth enough to risk federal prosecution and sophisticated enough to fool port security. I step back from the trailer, planning to call law enforcement and report the contraband. That's when I notice the footprints in the thin layer of dust on the trailer floor. Boot prints leading from the crate to the rear doors, still wet with morning dew. Someone was inside my trailer minutes ago, close enough to touch my cargo, invisible as smoke. The realization hits like a physical blow. They're not just using my truck for smuggling. They're using me as an unwitting courier, probably tracking my movements and timing their insertion perfectly. My hands shake as I reach for my phone. But before I can dial 911, a figure emerges from behind a stack of shipping containers 50 yards away. Male, average height, wearing Port Authority coveralls and a reflective safety vest. He walks toward me with the measured pace of someone who belongs here. But something about his gait triggers every alarm bell in my head. He moves too quietly for work boots on concrete, and his face remains shadowed despite the floodlights overhead. "Problem with your load, driver?" he calls out, voice carrying clearly across the empty space. I retreat toward my cab, keeping the trailer between us. "Who are you? Where are the dock workers?" He doesn't answer directly, just continues his approach with that same unhurried stride. As he gets closer, I see that his coveralls are too clean for someone who's been working cargo, and the safety vest bears no company logos or identification numbers. "Your trailer's been selected for random inspection," he says, now close enough that I can see his face. Pale, unremarkable, with eyes that reflect light like a nocturnal animal's. "Port security. Need to document that crate for customs." The words sound official, but every detail feels wrong. Port inspections don't happen at 3 a.m., and legitimate authorities don't emerge from shadows to conduct business. This man wants access to my trailer, and he's willing to impersonate federal officials to get it. I key my CB radio, broadcasting on the emergency channel. "Mayday, Mayday, Port of Long Beach Building 47. Commercial driver being approached by unknown subject claiming Port Authority. Need immediate law enforcement response." The man in coveralls tilts his head, listening to my transmission. Then he pulls out a handheld radio and speaks into it. "Cancel that broadcast. False alarm." My CB immediately goes silent, as if someone has jammed the frequency. That's when I run. Not toward the port exit. That's too far, and he might have Confederates waiting. But toward the cluster of other trucks parked at nearby docks. Drivers help each other out here, especially when someone's in trouble. I sprint across the loading area, work boots slapping concrete, the man in coveralls following at the same measured pace. He's not trying to catch me, just herding me toward some predetermined destination. I reach the closest truck, a Peterbilt hauling auto parts, and bang on the sleeper curtains. "Driver, wake up! Emergency!" No response. I try the next truck, then the next. Every cab is dark, curtains drawn, doors locked. Either these drivers are sound sleepers, or they're not drivers at all. Just props in an elaborate theater designed to make me feel safe while leading me into a trap. The coffee truck sits at the far end of the loading area, its generator humming, service window glowing yellow. Real or not, it represents human contact and potential witnesses. I sprint toward it, lungs burning in the cool night air. Behind me, the man in coveralls maintains his leisurely pursuit, as if he knows I have nowhere to go that isn't already under his control. The coffee truck is empty. Fresh donuts sit under heat lamps, espresso machine steams quietly, register drawer hangs open with bills and coins visible. But no vendor, no customers, no sign of where everyone went. A hand-lettered sign taped to the service window reads, "Back in 5 minutes." But the ink is still wet, as if someone wrote it seconds before vanishing. I'm trapped in a manufactured environment, surrounded by the props of normal port operations, but stripped of actual human presence. Someone has cleared Building 47 of legitimate workers and filled it with theatrical substitutes. Fake trucks, fake facilities, fake authority figures. The question is why? What's valuable enough to justify this level of deception? The answer walks out of the shadows between 2 shipping containers. Not the man in coveralls, someone new. Female, Asian, wearing an expensive business suit that looks out of place in an industrial setting. She approaches with the confidence of someone who owns everything in sight. And maybe she does. "Mr. Rodriguez," she says, pronouncing my name with academic precision. "Thank you for transporting our cargo safely to its destination." I back against the coffee truck, trapped between her and the loading dock. I don't know who you are or what's in that crate, but I'm not part of whatever this is. I'm just hauling electronics to Phoenix. She smiles, the expression as cold as moonlight on steel. "You're hauling much more than electronics, Mr. Rodriguez. That crate contains industrial prototypes worth approximately $50 million. Technology that certain governments would kill for. The number hits like a physical blow. $50 million in stolen technology, transported unknowingly in my trailer under cover of legitimate Samsung cargo. If federal agents discover it, I'll be charged as an accessory to industrial espionage, facing decades in federal prison. But if I help these people complete their theft, I become complicit in crimes that could affect national security." "Why me?" I ask, stalling for time while scanning for escape routes. "Why use my truck?" She adjusts her suit jacket, revealing a shoulder holster underneath. "Your route is perfect. Phoenix to Los Angeles. Regular weekly runs, impeccable safety record. No one suspects a veteran driver with clean DOT inspections. You're the invisible courier, moving our assets while customs focuses on suspicious shipments." The man in coveralls has circled around behind me, cutting off retreat toward the main port area. 2 more figures emerge from between shipping containers. Additional security, probably armed, definitely professional. I'm outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in a facility they control completely. But 22 years of night driving have taught me that surrender isn't always the safest option. "You want the crate? Take it," I tell the woman. "Unhook my trailer, transfer your cargo, let me drive away empty. No harm, no foul." She shakes her head. "Unfortunately, you've seen too much. Our operation depends on anonymity, and you can identify all of us. The crate continues to Phoenix as planned. You continue as our unwitting courier. everyone wins. Except if something goes wrong. If customs inspects my load, if the GPS tracking reveals the unauthorized access, if law enforcement connects me to the theft. I take the fall while these people vanish into whatever criminal network spawned them. I'll be the patsy, the expendable trucker who carried technology secrets across state lines and couldn't explain how contraband appeared in his trailer. That's when the port security alarms begin wailing. Not the steady beep of a vehicle backing up or the mechanical buzz of crane operations, but the ear-splitting shriek of facility-wide emergency alerts. Floodlights begin strobing red, and over the public address system, a computer-generated voice announces, "Security breach, Building 47. All personnel evacuate immediately." The woman in the business suit curses in what sounds like Mandarin, then barks orders to her team in English. Lock all down the perimeter. Kill the alarms. Find out who triggered the system. But it's too late. In the distance, I can see genuine port security vehicles racing toward Building 47, light bars flashing, sirens growing louder. Someone, maybe a real dock worker, maybe legitimate law enforcement, has discovered the deception and called for backup. The criminals scatter like roaches when the lights come on. The woman and her team sprint toward a black SUV parked between shipping containers, leaving me standing beside my compromised trailer with $50 million in stolen technology and no way to explain how it got there. I have maybe 3 minutes before security arrives. 3 minutes to decide whether to run or stay and try to explain the unexplainable. I choose a third option. I climb into my cab, fire the engine, and drive straight to the port security checkpoint, trailer and contraband intact. Better to surrender voluntarily with evidence preserved than flee and look guilty. The security guards are confused but professional, calling FBI agents who arrive within the hour to take possession of the crate and interview me about the night's events. The interrogation lasts 6 hours, but my story checks out. The criminals used sophisticated port access to stage their operation, jamming communications and clearing legitimate workers from Building 47. The crate contains industrial 3D printing technology stolen from a defense contractor, worth exactly the $50 million the woman claimed. My truck was selected because my route profile matched their transportation needs. But I had no knowledge of the conspiracy. Samsung confirms that the legitimate electronics cargo was never supposed to be loaded at Building 47. Someone had hacked their logistics system and redirected my delivery to facilitate the technology transfer. The real dock workers had been told the building was closed for fumigation, explaining their absence. Even the graffiti was part of the psychological operation, designed to make me feel watched and vulnerable. The criminals escaped, but federal agents recovered the stolen technology and dismantled what they called the most sophisticated cargo theft operation in port history. I was cleared of all charges, commended for my cooperation, and released with a stern warning to report any future anomalies immediately. Samsung paid a bonus for preserving their cargo during the security incident. But the experience changed something fundamental about how I see the road. Every loading dock now feels like a potential trap, every unusual delay a possible setup. I've installed additional security cameras, carry emergency communication equipment, and maintain constant contact with dispatch during high-value loads. Because I learned that in the world of international commerce, legitimate freight can become criminal conspiracy with nothing more than a diverted delivery order and the wrong crate appearing in your trailer. The technology in that wooden box eventually made its way back to the defense contractor, where it contributes to systems I'll never understand, protecting interests I'll never see. But sometimes, late at night in some anonymous truck stop, I wonder how many other drivers are unknowingly carrying cargo that could change their lives forever. One delivery at a time. Let's move to our 7th story. I'm Jamal Washington, 31 years old, been driving a 2019 Mack Anthem for 2 years now, hauling everything from furniture to machinery across the Midwest. Tonight, I'm deadheading back to Kansas City from a delivery in Detroit, running empty with just my tractor and no trailer, what we call bobtailing. It's not the most profitable way to burn diesel, but sometimes you take the miles you can get. My route has me cutting through rural Kansas on 2-lane state highways, avoiding the interstate tolls and enjoying the kind of quiet country roads that remind you why trucking used to be called the romantic profession. It's October 15th, harvest season, and the countryside rolls past my windshield like scenes from a Norman Rockwell painting. Cornfields stretch to the horizon, their stalks dry and golden in the late afternoon sun. Farmhouses dot the landscape with their wraparound porches and red barns, smoke rising from chimneys as families settle in for supper. My CB picks up the occasional farmer reporting grain prices or warning about slow-moving combines on the back roads. But mostly it's just the steady hum of my engine and the satisfaction of honest work completed. Junction City appears around a gentle curve just as the sun touches the western horizon. Population 847, according to the weathered sign. Established 1887, home of the Fighting Eagles football team. It's the kind of small Kansas town that time forgot. A single main street lined with red brick buildings, most of them built when the railroad still stopped here twice a day. A grain elevator rises above the tree line like a concrete cathedral, and the water tower bears the town name in letters big enough to read from orbit. The only businesses that look genuinely operational are a Casey's General Store, a family restaurant called Mabel's Kitchen, and a combination bait shop and video rental store that somehow survived the streaming revolution. I need fuel and coffee, both in quantities large enough to get me back to Kansas City without another stop. The Casey's sits at the junction of Highway 177 and Main Street, its red and yellow sign glowing like a beacon in the gathering dusk. I ease the Mack into the truck area behind the store, noting that I'm the only commercial vehicle in sight. Most long-haul drivers stick to the interstates where truck stops offer showers, laundry, and hot meals. But I've always preferred these small-town stops where people still wave when you pass, and the clerk knows your name after the second visit. The fuel pumps are older models, the kind that require you to lift the handle before the LCD display activates. Diesel flows at maybe 8 gallons per minute, slower than modern truck stops, but steady enough to top off my tanks in 15 minutes. While the fuel runs, I walk into the store, boots echoing on linoleum that's probably older than I am. The clerk behind the counter is a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. She looks up from a paperback romance novel and smiles. Evening, driver. Don't see many big trucks through here anymore since they finished the bypass. I pour coffee from a pot that's been brewing since morning, add enough cream to cut the bitterness, and grab a package of glazed donuts that expired yesterday, but still look edible. Just passing through, ma'am. Peaceful little town you got here. She rings up my purchases, chatting about the weather and harvest conditions while my fuel pump clicks steadily outside. That's when she mentions the watchers. You be careful driving through after dark, she says, lowering her voice even though we're alone in the store. Folks have been reporting strange activity lately. Cars following people, strangers taking pictures of license plates. Sheriff thinks it might be connected to that meth problem over in Chapman County. But we're not taking chances. I thank her for the warning, pay for fuel and coffee, and head back to the truck thinking about small-town paranoia and how isolated communities can turn suspicious when the outside world starts feeling threatening. The Mac fires up with the satisfying rumble of a well-maintained engine, and I ease back onto Highway 177, planning to make Kansas City by midnight. Junction City streetlights fade in my mirrors, replaced by the kind of absolute darkness you only find in rural areas with no light pollution. Stars emerge overhead like scattered diamonds, and the only illumination comes from my headlights and the occasional farmhouse window glowing yellow in the distance. 10 miles south of town, I notice headlights in my rearview mirror. Single vehicle, maintaining steady distance, maybe a quarter-mile back. Nothing unusual about that. Highway 177 is a legitimate route, and plenty of people travel it at night. But as minutes pass, the vehicle never gains or falls back, never attempts to pass despite my moderate speed. It just hangs there like a shadow, matching my pace with mechanical precision. I key up the CB. Southbound 177, got a four-wheeler behind me, you need a round, just give a holler. Silence answers. I try again on channel 19. Any mobile listening. This is a bobtail, Mac southbound on 177. Vehicle behind me, identify yourself. Static fills the channel, punctuated by occasional bursts of noise that might be someone keying a mic without speaking. The headlights continue their silent pursuit, close enough to see but far enough to avoid identification. Around mile marker 47, the road curves through a section of timber that blocks ambient light from surrounding farmland. In this tunnel of darkness, the following vehicle's headlights become more prominent, revealing details I hadn't noticed before. It's a late model SUV, dark-colored, riding high on oversized tires. The headlight pattern suggests aftermarket LED arrays, the kind preferred by law enforcement and private security. But there are no emergency flashers, no official markings visible in my mirrors. I decide to test their intentions. I slow to 45 miles per hour in a 55 zone, giving them an easy opportunity to pass if they're legitimate travelers with somewhere to be. The SUV matches my reduced speed perfectly, maintaining that same quarter-mile interval. I speed back up to 60, and they accelerate in perfect synchronization. Whatever they want, it's not to reach a destination faster than I'm traveling. The CB crackles with a voice I recognize. The store clerk from Junction City, calling from her home radio setup. "Driver, you still out there on 1777? That truck with the red and black Mac cab." I key up immediately. "Yes, ma'am, this is that driver." "What's on your mind?" Her response makes my blood run cold. "Sheriff just called. 3 men in a black SUV were asking about you specifically. Wanted to know which direction you headed, how long ago you left. When Jimmy wouldn't tell them, they offered him $50 for the information. $50 for intelligence about a random trucker's movements. That's not meth dealers or small-time criminals. That's organized, professional surveillance with specific objectives. Someone has identified me as a target and is willing to pay for tracking information. The question is why? I'm running empty, carrying no cargo worth stealing. My personal belongings are typical trucker gear. Nothing valuable enough to justify this level of pursuit." "Ma'am, did the sheriff get descriptions of these men?" I ask, watching the SUV's headlights grow slightly larger in my mirrors. All he said was they weren't local, spoke with accents that sounded East Coast maybe. Drove off when Jimmy refused to cooperate, but Mary saw them circle back through the alley behind the store. The implication hangs in the air like smoke. They were watching, waiting, gathering intelligence about my route and timing. I'm passing through farm country now, cornfields stretching endlessly on both sides of the road. No side roads, no businesses, nowhere to turn or seek help. The nearest town is Abilene, still 30 miles ahead, and cell phone coverage out here is spotty at best. If these people mean harm, they've chosen their location perfectly. Isolated, dark, with no witnesses or escape routes. The SUV begins closing the distance. Quarter mile becomes 200 yards, then 100. Their high-beam headlights flood my cab, washing out my mirrors and forcing me to adjust them to reduce the glare. They're not trying to be subtle anymore, abandoning the pretense of coincidental travel. This is deliberate intimidation, designed to provoke a reaction or force me into a mistake. I grab my CB mic and broadcast on the emergency channel. Any station, commercial driver on Highway 177 southbound mile marker 43. Being followed by suspicious vehicle, request immediate law enforcement assistance. A voice answers immediately. Male, official sounding, claiming to be Kansas Highway. Patrol. Driver, we copy your transmission. Maintain current speed and direction. Units are responding to your location. Relief floods through me until I notice that the SUV has also slowed, as if the driver heard the same transmission. That's impossible, unless they're monitoring emergency frequencies, which suggests either law enforcement or criminals sophisticated enough to own police scanners. The official voice returns. Driver, for your safety, take the next county road east and proceed to the abandoned grain elevator. Emergency vehicles will meet you there. Something about the instruction feels wrong. Why direct me away from the main highway to an isolated location? Legitimate law enforcement would want to intercept on a public road with witnesses and backup nearby. I've never heard of cops directing potential victims toward abandoned buildings, especially in rural areas where response times are measured in hours rather than minutes. Negative on that instruction, I respond. I'll maintain current route to Abilene where there's proper lighting and backup. The official voice turns sharp. Driver, you will comply with law enforcement directives immediately. Exit at County Road 18 or face obstruction charges. The threat confirms my suspicions. Real cops don't threaten charges for refusing to drive to isolated locations. Someone is impersonating law enforcement to manipulate my movements. The SUV accelerates suddenly, pulling alongside my cab in the left lane. Through my side window, I can see 3 occupants, all male, all wearing dark clothing. The passenger window rolls down, and a man leans out holding what looks like a badge wallet. He signals for me to pull over, pointing toward the shoulder with exaggerated authority. But even in the poor light, something about the badge looks wrong. Too shiny, wrong shape, missing the official details that mark genuine law enforcement credentials. I shake my head and point toward Abilene, indicating I'll stop there. The man in the SUV becomes agitated, shouting something I can't hear over engine noise and wind. He reaches inside his jacket and produces a handheld spotlight, aiming the brilliant beam directly at my eyes. The sudden glare is blinding, washing out my vision and forcing me to rely on peripheral sight to stay on the road. That's when I see the roadblock ahead. 50 yards in front of me, 2 vehicles are positioned across both lanes, a pickup truck and a sedan, arranged to create a funnel that will force me to stop. Their headlights are off, making them nearly invisible until my own beams revealed them. This is a coordinated operation, probably planned for hours or days, with multiple vehicles and specific knowledge of my route. I have seconds to decide. Stop and face whatever these people want, or attempt to break through their roadblock and risk a high-speed collision. The Mack outweighs both blocking vehicles combined, but I'm not armed, and there's no guarantee I can escape, even if I breach their line. Running might also escalate the situation from robbery to attempted murder, assuming they're armed and willing to use lethal force. Instead, I choose option 3, I downshift rapidly, engine braking hard while laying on the horn in a continuous blast that shatters the rural silence. The air horn's 120 decibel wail carries for miles in the still night air, alerting anyone within hearing distance that something is seriously wrong. At the same time, I flip on every light the Mac carries: headlights, markers, flashers, work lights, turning the truck into a rolling beacon visible from aircraft. The effect is immediate and dramatic. The SUV swerves away from my cab, its driver apparently startled by the sudden noise and light show. The vehicles blocking the road ahead begin moving, their drivers scrambling to reposition as my horn continues its emergency blast. I maintain speed toward their roadblock, betting that they won't risk a head-on collision with 80,000 pounds of truck moving at 45 miles per hour. I'm right. The pickup truck lurches forward, clearing the right lane just as I thunder past. The sedan attempts to move but stalls, forcing me to swerve onto the shoulder to avoid clipping its rear bumper. Gravel sprays from my tires as I fight to maintain control, the Mac's suspension bouncing over the uneven surface before I regain pavement and accelerate toward Abilene. In my mirrors, I watch the three vehicles attempt to regroup and continue pursuit. But their careful choreography has dissolved into chaos, with the vehicles trying to turn around on a narrow highway, while my air horn continues to announce their presence to anyone within miles. One of the cars has mechanical problems, sitting motionless with steam rising from under its hood. The SUV manages to resume the chase, but they're now more than a mile behind and losing ground as I push the Mac to its maximum legal speed. Abilene's lights appear ahead like a constellation of hope. Streetlights, business signs, traffic signals that prove civilization still exists. I roll into town with horns still blaring, lights still flashing, looking like either a parade float or an emergency vehicle. The local police station sits on Main Street, a modest brick building with 2 patrol cars parked outside. I pull into their lot, set the parking brake, and continue honking until officers emerge to investigate the disturbance. The next 2 hours blur together in a series of police interviews, radio communications, and incident reports. The Kansas Highway Patrol confirms they had no units in the area and issued no instructions for me to exit the highway. Someone was indeed impersonating law enforcement, using sophisticated radio equipment to monitor and manipulate emergency communications. A multi-agency search of Highway 177 finds the abandoned sedan, apparently stolen from a Kansas City suburb 3 days earlier, but no trace of the other vehicles or their occupants. The investigating officers take my statement seriously, noting that similar incidents have been reported across rural Kansas over the past month. The pattern suggests an organized criminal group targeting commercial drivers for reasons still unclear. No actual robberies have been completed. The criminals seem to flee whenever their victims resist or call for help. But the level of organization and equipment suggests they're building towards something larger than simple highway robbery. I spend the night in a motel in Abilene, too wired to sleep and too paranoid to continue driving in darkness. The next morning, Kansas City Dispatch calls with an update. FBI agents want to interview me about the incident, and the company is installing satellite tracking and emergency communication equipment on all trucks as a precautionary measure. What happened to me has been categorized as domestic terrorism, an organized attempt to disrupt interstate commerce through intimidation and impersonation of law enforcement. The drive back to Kansas City passes without incident, but I find myself checking mirrors obsessively and avoiding rural highways whenever possible. Every SUV becomes a potential threat, every radio transmission a possible deception. The investigators eventually determined that my truck was targeted because of its size and the fact that I was traveling alone. The criminals were apparently testing tactics for stopping larger vehicles, possibly as preparation for hijacking hazmat loads or armored trucks. 3 weeks later, the FBI arrests 5 members of what they call a domestic extremist group, planning to steal radioactive materials from medical transport vehicles. My encounter on Highway 177 was apparently a field test of their interception methods, using a random trucker as an unwitting training exercise. The roadblock, the fake radio traffic, the coordinated pursuit, all of it was practice for an operation that could have contaminated half of Kansas if they'd succeeded. The clerk at Junction City's Casey's store sends me a newspaper clipping about the arrests, along with a handwritten note. "Glad you trusted your instincts and didn't stop. Sometimes the best defense against dangerous people is making enough noise that they can't hide in the shadows anymore." She's right. But the experience taught me that in small towns, where everybody knows everybody, strangers asking questions about truckers should be treated as potential threats rather than curious travelers. Now when I deadhead through rural areas, I maintain constant radio contact with dispatch, carry multiple communication devices, and plan routes that keep me close to populated areas. Because I learned that the isolation and independence that make trucking appealing can also make drivers vulnerable to predators who understand exactly how to exploit the trust and cooperation that keep America's highways functioning. The road tests everyone eventually. But some tests are designed by people who want you to fail in the worst possible way. Let's move to our 8th story. I'm Elena Vasquez, 36 years old, bilingual driver hauling cross-border freight for 12 years now. Tonight, I'm piloting a 2018 Volvo VNL through the El Paso-Juarez corridor, one of the busiest commercial crossings on the U.S.-Mexico border. My trailer is loaded with consumer electronics, smartphones, tablets, gaming consoles, manufactured in Asian factories and destined for retail distribution centers across Texas. The manifest shows $2.3 million in cargo, which makes this run both lucrative and dangerous. Electronics are prime targets for organized theft rings that operate on both sides of the border. It's March 8th. Temperatures still hovering around 95 degrees Fahrenheit, even though the sun disappeared behind the Franklin Mountains an hour ago. The desert air shimmers with heat that rises from asphalt like invisible flames, and my air conditioning works overtime to keep the cab comfortable. I've made this run maybe 200 times, but it never gets routine. The border is a living organism that changes constantly. New security protocols, shifting cartel territories, political tensions that can turn a normal crossing into a 12-hour nightmare without warning. I clear U.S. Customs at the Bridge of the Americas just after 2200, presenting my FAST card and commercial driving credentials to agents who've seen me enough times to recognize my face. The inspection is cursory. They run my trailer through the gamma-ray scanner, check my manifest against the cargo seals, and wave me through with professional efficiency. Crossing into Mexico is usually more complex. But tonight, the Mexican customs agents seem equally eager to process commercial traffic quickly. Maybe the late hour works in my favor, or maybe they're dealing with more pressing security concerns elsewhere in the facility. The electronics are bound for a distribution center in Chihuahua, a 5-hour drive through desert terrain that alternates between empty wilderness and small industrial towns built around maquiladora factories. My GPS shows the route clearly: Highway 45 south through Ciudad Juarez, then straight desert running until I reach the customer's facility. I've got plenty of fuel, fresh coffee, and a satellite communication system that works on both sides of the border. Everything should be routine except for the nagging sensation that someone's been watching me since I left the customs compound. The feeling started as I processed through Mexican immigration, a tickle between my shoulder blades that suggested eyes on my back. I'd turned to look, but saw only the normal chaos of a busy border crossing. Pedestrians hauling shopping bags, taxi drivers arguing over fares, vendors selling everything from electronics to street food. Nothing unusual, but 12 years of cross-border hauling have taught me to trust my instincts. The border attracts predators the way roadkill attracts vultures, and complacency kills drivers faster than mechanical failures. Highway 45 south of Juarez cuts through terrain that looks like the surface of Mars. Red rock formations, sparse vegetation, and a sky so clear you can see individual stars despite the city's light pollution behind me. My Volvo's headlights carve a tunnel through the darkness, revealing occasional reflective road signs and the green glow of eyes from nocturnal animals hunting in the desert. The CB radio picks up Spanish-language chatter from other commercial drivers, mostly complaints about fuel prices and delivery schedules. Normal trucker conversation, nothing that suggests trouble ahead. 20 kilometers south of the city, I notice headlights in my mirrors. Single vehicle, maintaining steady distance. Probably another commercial driver making the same run I am. Mexico's highways carry plenty of legitimate freight traffic, especially at night when temperatures drop enough to make desert driving bearable. But as kilometers pass, the vehicle never gains or falls back, never attempts to pass despite my moderate speed. The same pattern I've learned to associate with surveillance. I key up my CB radio and switch to channel 19. Conductores en la 45. Hay alguien atrás de mí que necesita pasar. The Spanish flows naturally. I learned it growing up in El Paso's bilingual environment, refined it through years of cross-border commerce. A voice answers immediately. Negativo, compañera. No hay nadie detrás de ti. The trucker claims there's no one behind me, but I can clearly see headlights in my mirrors. That's impossible unless the following vehicle isn't using standard radio equipment, or the trucker who answered is part of whatever's happening. I try again on the emergency frequency. Tráfico de emergencia. Camión comercial kilómetro 285 sur. Vehículo sospechoso siguiendo. Necesito asistencia. This time no one responds at all, which is even more troubling. Mexican truckers monitor emergency channels religiously, especially on isolated highways where mechanical problems can become life-threatening. The following vehicle begins closing distance. What was half a kilometer becomes 300 meters, then 200. Their headlights grow larger in my mirrors, revealing details I hadn't noticed before. It's a pickup truck, white, possibly a Ford or Chevrolet, riding high on oversized tires. The headlight pattern suggests aftermarket LED arrays, the kind preferred by law enforcement and security contractors. But there are no official markings visible, no emergency flashers that would identify legitimate authority. Around kilometer 273, the highway curves through a section of hills that block ambient light from surrounding settlements. In this pocket of absolute darkness, the pickup truck's headlights become blindingly bright, flooding my cab and washing out my mirrors. They're running high beams now, either as intimidation or to prevent me from seeing details about their vehicle. The message is clear. They want me to know they're there, and they want me to be afraid. I grab my satellite phone and dial the emergency number for my company's security department. The call connects after 2 rings to a dispatcher in Dallas, who's trained to handle exactly these situations. Elena, what's your current location and situation? I provide GPS coordinates and describe the pickup truck, emphasizing that they've been following me since the border crossing. The dispatcher's tone turns serious. We're tracking your location. Mexican authorities have been notified. Do not stop your vehicle under any circumstances. The pickup truck accelerates suddenly, pulling alongside my trailer in the left lane. Through my passenger mirror, I can see 2 occupants, both male, both wearing dark clothing. The passenger window rolls down, and a man leans out holding what appears to be an official badge. He signals for me to pull over, pointing toward the shoulder with exaggerated authority. But even in the poor light, something about the badge looks wrong. Too small, wrong color, missing the official details that mark genuine law enforcement credentials. I've been through enough legitimate inspections to recognize the real thing. Mexican federal police use specific vehicles, specific uniforms, specific procedures that these men aren't following. Real cops don't conduct highway stops using unmarked pickup trucks with aftermarket lights. They don't follow commercial vehicles for kilometers without identifying themselves. And they don't operate without radio communication or backup units. I shake my head and point toward the next town, indicating I'll stop there where there's proper lighting and witnesses. The man in the pickup becomes agitated, shouting something I can't hear over engine noise and wind. He reaches inside his jacket and produces a red flashlight, aiming the beam directly at my windshield. The sudden glare is blinding, forcing me to slow down and rely on peripheral vision to stay on the road. That's when I see the roadblock ahead. Two vehicles positioned across both lanes, another pickup truck and a sedan, arranged to create a funnel that will force me to stop. Their lights are off, making them nearly invisible until my headlights revealed them. This is a coordinated operation involving at least 4 vehicles and multiple personnel. Too sophisticated for ordinary highway robbery. Too professional for cartel soldiers looking to steal cargo. I have seconds to decide between stopping and facing whatever these people want, or attempting to break through their roadblock with 80,000 pounds of loaded truck. The Volvo has the mass advantage. But I'm not armed, and there's no guarantee of escape even if I breach their line. Running might also escalate from robbery to attempted murder, assuming they're willing to use lethal force to protect their operation. Instead, I choose the third option that saved more truckers than heroics or submission combined. I grab my air horn and lay on it continuously, while flashing every light the Volvo carries. Headlights, markers, hazards, work lights. The 120 decibel blast shatters the desert silence and turns my truck into a rolling beacon visible for miles. At the same time, I key my CB radio and broadcast on multiple channels. Socorro, socorro, asalto en la carretera 45 kilómetro 268. Camión comercial, bajo ataque, necesito ayuda inmediata. The effect is immediate. The pickup truck alongside me swerves away, apparently startled by the sudden noise and light show. The vehicles blocking the road ahead begin moving, their carefully planned positions dissolving into chaos as my horn continues its emergency blast. I maintain speed toward their roadblock, betting they won't risk a head-on collision with a loaded semi moving at highway speed. The gamble pays off. The blocking vehicles scatter like startled livestock, clearing both lanes just as I thunder past. One pickup truck stalls trying to get out of my way, and I have to swerve onto the shoulder to avoid clipping its tailgate. Gravel sprays from my tires as the Volvo suspension bounces over uneven ground. But I regain pavement and accelerate toward the lights of the next town. In my mirrors, I watch the criminal vehicles attempt to regroup and continue pursuit. But their coordination has collapsed, with trucks trying to turn around on a narrow highway while my air horn broadcasts their location to anyone within hearing distance. Mexican truckers take these emergency calls seriously, and within minutes, my CB radio explodes, with voices offering assistance and relaying my position to authorities. The town of Villa Ahumada appears ahead. Not much more than a truck stop, gas station, and a few residential streets. But it has Mexican federal police stationed there specifically to patrol this stretch of highway, I roll into the police compound with horns still blaring, stopping beside two patrol vehicles parked under floodlights bright enough to illuminate a baseball stadium. The officers who emerge are professional and prepared. They've been monitoring radio traffic about my situation and have already contacted units to intercept the criminal vehicles. Within an hour, Mexican federal police arrest 3 men in 2 pickup trucks, discovering sophisticated radio equipment, fake police badges, and weapons that suggest this was more than simple cargo theft. A 4th vehicle escapes, but police recover enough evidence to classify this as an organized criminal enterprise. The interrogation reveals that I was targeted because of my regular cross-border route and the high-value electronics I typically carry. The criminals had been monitoring customs radio traffic, identifying loaded trucks as they cleared the border, and selecting targets based on cargo value and driver vulnerability. My truck was flagged because electronics are easily resold, and the late-night timing suggested I'd be isolated on desert highways. The fake police badges were sophisticated, counterfeits designed to convince drivers to stop voluntarily, avoiding the risks and complications of forced interception. Once stopped, drivers would be robbed of their cargo and sometimes their vehicles, with the criminals using official-looking credentials to delay victims' reports to real authorities. It's a variation on the express kidnapping tactic that Mexican criminals have refined over decades. Mexican authorities escort me to the distribution center in Chihuahua, where I deliver the electronics 6 hours behind schedule but with cargo intact. The customer is understanding. They're familiar with the security challenges of cross-border commerce and grateful that I protected their shipment despite personal risk. The company pays a safety bonus and installs additional communication equipment on all trucks making the Mexico run. But the experience changes how I approach border crossings. I now vary my routes and timing, avoid predictable patterns that criminals can monitor and exploit. I carry multiple communication devices, maintain constant contact with security dispatchers, and trust my instincts when something feels wrong. The border teaches hard lessons to anyone who works there regularly, and survival depends on learning them quickly. 6 months later, I'm hauling another electronics load through the same corridor when my CB radio crackles with an emergency call from another driver. Socorro, camión comercial bajo ataque. Carretera 45 kilómetro 280. The location is barely 10 kilometers from where I was ambushed. The same stretch of isolated highway, where criminals wait in the darkness for lone truckers carrying valuable cargo. This time, I'm the one coordinating the response, relaying the driver's position to Mexican authorities while racing toward the scene with other commercial drivers who monitor emergency channels. We arrive to find another attempted roadblock dissolved into chaos. The criminals fleeing rather than face multiple witnesses and coordinated resistance. The targeted driver is shaken but unharmed, her cargo protected by the same tactics that saved my load months earlier. The border never truly becomes safe, but drivers who respect its dangers and support each other can survive its challenges. Every successful defense teaches lessons that protect the next victim, and every criminal operation defeated makes the highways slightly safer for legitimate commerce. It's not heroism. It's professional survival in an environment where complacency kills and community saves lives. As I write this report for company security files, Mexican federal police are still investigating the criminal network that targeted my truck and dozens of others. They've made additional arrests, seized weapons and equipment, and disrupted operations that cost legitimate businesses millions in stolen cargo. But they warn that other groups will emerge to replace the ones they've eliminated, because the border's geography and economics create opportunities that criminals will always try to exploit. The solution isn't perfect security. That's impossible in a region where thousands of trucks cross daily carrying billions in legitimate trade. The solution is professional awareness, community cooperation, and the refusal to become easy victims. Because on highways where law enforcement is stretched thin and help can be hours away, drivers who look out for each other become the first and best line of defense against predators who see commercial vehicles as nothing more than mobile ATMs waiting to be cracked open in the desert darkness. Let's move to our 9th story. I'm Tyler Bennett, 29 years old, a newbie owner-operator who's been driving my pride and joy, a 2021 Kenworth T680, for exactly 8 months now. Tonight, I'm eastbound on Interstate 30, approaching the Texarkana way station that sits like a concrete island between the twin cities of Texas and Arkansas. The facility straddles the state line, a sprawling complex of inspection bays and administrative buildings that process thousands of commercial vehicles every week. My flatbed trailer carries 42,000 pounds of steel coils bound for a fabrication plant in Meridian, Mississippi. And I'm running legal on both weight and hours. The delivery window opens at 8 a.m. tomorrow, giving me just enough time to make the run if I don't hit any delays. It's 10:15 on a humid September night, the kind of oppressive heat that makes asphalt soft and turns truck cabs into rolling saunas, despite air conditioning running full blast. The way station appears in my headlights like an industrial mirage. Concrete platforms lit by sodium vapor lamps, electronic signs directing traffic flow, and the familiar sight of big rigs queued up for inspection. I've been through this facility maybe a dozen times since buying my rig, and it's always been routine. Pull onto the scale, get my weight ticket, maybe endure a quick safety inspection if I'm selected for random screening. Tonight feels different, though I can't put my finger on why. I ease the Kenworth into the approach lane, following a grain hauler that's just finishing its way in. The scale house sits elevated above the platform, its windows glowing yellow against the night sky. Through the glass, I can see the silhouette of the station attendant, a burly man named Hoskins, who's worked this shift for at least 10 years. He waves me forward with the same bored gesture I've seen countless times. But something about his movements seems sluggish, almost mechanical. The electronic sign flashes, "Proceed to scale," in amber letters. And I guide my rig onto the platform, feeling the familiar dip as 80,000 pounds settles onto the load cells. My air brakes hiss as I come to a stop, and I wait for the weight reading to stabilize. That's when Hoskins' voice crackles over the intercom, distorted by poor audio quality and what sounds like interference from nearby radio equipment. "Weight reading glitch tonight," he says, words slightly slurred. "Scale might show heavier than actual. Don't worry about it, just keep your receipts straight." The warning strikes me as odd. Way stations run calibrated equipment that's tested regularly by state inspectors. Glitches are rare, and when they occur, stations usually shut down affected scales until repairs are completed. But Hoskins has been here longer than I've been driving, so I figure he knows what he's talking about. I watch the digital display cycle through its calculation, expecting to see my gross weight appear in glowing red numbers. Instead, the display shows 0. Not an error code, not a system fault message, just 3 zeros where my weight should be. I tap the horn lightly, a polite signal that something's wrong with the reading. Hoskins doesn't respond from the scale house, and the intercom remains silent. I check my mirrors, making sure I'm properly positioned on the platform, then wait for instructions that don't come. That's when I hear the voice. Not over the intercom or CB radio, but seeming to come from the scale platform itself. A low, distorted utterance that sounds like too heavy. The words echo strangely, as if spoken in an empty warehouse rather than the open air of a truck way station. I look up at the scale house, but Hoskins appears to be reading paperwork, oblivious to whatever I'm hearing. I key up my CB radio, hoping to reach another driver who might explain what's happening. Breaker 19. Any drivers monitoring Texarkana scales? Getting some weird readings here. Static answers, punctuated by what sounds like whispered voices just below the threshold of understanding. I try again on channel 19. Texarkana scales, driver on the platform, scale showing 0 weight. Need assistance. This time the static resolves into something that makes my blood run cold. A voice, barely audible, saying, "You're next." My hands shake as I adjust the CB squelch, trying to clear the interference. The whispered voice comes again, clearer now. "You're next, you're heavier." The words don't make sense in the context of a routine way station stop, but they carry an unmistakable threat. I grab my logbook and bills of lading, double-checking my calculations. Gross weight, 79,800 pounds. Legal on all axles. Clean inspection record. Nothing that should trigger special attention or ominous radio transmissions. I climb down from the cab to perform a walk-around inspection, hoping to find some mechanical explanation for the strange readings and audio phenomena. The scale platform is standard concrete and steel construction, with weight sensors embedded beneath the surface and LED lights, marking the proper positioning zones. Everything appears normal until I reach my rear tandems and notice something that stops me cold. Fresh blood. Dark red stains on my trailer tires, wet enough to reflect the station's floodlights. The blood appears to be seeping from the tire treads themselves, as if something inside the rubber is bleeding out onto the pavement. I circle both tandems, checking for signs of recent animal strikes or cargo leaks that might explain the stains. Nothing. No roadkill stuck in the wheels, no damaged freight containers, no logical source for blood that seems to materialize from the tires themselves. I grab a water jug from my side box and splash it across the stained treads, washing away the red liquid. But within seconds, fresh blood begins seeping through the rubber again, collecting in the tread grooves and dripping onto the concrete platform. My heart pounds as I scrub the tires again, this time using a wire brush from my toolkit. The blood vanishes under the abrasive action, only to return with the persistence of something that exists beyond physical explanation. Back in the cab, I try calling dispatch on my satellite communication system. The call connects, but instead of my company's night dispatcher, I hear that same whispered voice. "You're next. You're heavier." I hang up and try again, this time dialing my wife's cell phone. The same result. Connection established, whispered threats instead of a human voice. My communication systems have been compromised by whatever's happening at this way station, isolating me from outside help. The CB radio erupts with overlapping voices, all whispering variations of the same message. Next, next, next. The words blend into a chorus of threats that seems to come from multiple sources simultaneously. I scan through all 40 channels, finding the same whispered warnings on each frequency. Someone, or something, has taken control of the radio spectrum around the way station, broadcasting messages that make no sense but feel unmistakably menacing. The intercom crackles to life again, but instead of Hoskins' voice, I hear something that makes my skin crawl. "Wait your soul." The words are followed by electronic distortion that sounds like laughter processed through a broken amplifier. The scale house windows flicker, as if the lighting inside is fluctuating with electrical problems. But Hoskins continues reading his paperwork, apparently unaware of the chaos surrounding my way in. I check my watch, 22:31. I've been on the scale platform for 16 minutes, far longer than any routine inspection should take. Other trucks are queuing up behind me, their drivers probably wondering why I'm holding up the line. But when I look in my mirrors, I see something impossible. The approach lanes are empty. No waiting vehicles, no other drivers, just empty concrete stretching back toward the interstate. Either I'm hallucinating, or the way station has somehow isolated me from normal traffic flow. The whispered voices on the CB radio grow louder, more insistent. You're heavier than you appear. You carry more than steel. The words suggest knowledge of my cargo that no outside observer should possess. My bills of lading clearly list steel coils, properly secured and manifested. But the voices imply I'm carrying something else, something that adds weight beyond what the scales can measure. I think about the blood seeping from my tires, the impossible zero reading on the scale, the electronic voices that have replaced normal communication systems. Everything points to a facility that operates according to rules that don't match the physical world I understand. The Texarkana Way Station has become something more than a routine inspection point. It's become a place where trucks are weighed not just for legal compliance, but for burdens that can't be measured in pounds. Panic rises in my chest as I realize I might never leave this platform. The whispered voices suggest I'm part of some process that has nothing to do with DOT regulations or safety inspections. I'm being evaluated by criteria that exist outside normal law enforcement, judged by standards that measure things beyond cargo weight and logbook compliance. That's when Hoskins finally responds to my presence. But instead of speaking through the intercom, his voice comes from directly beside my cab, close enough that I should be able to see him through my side window. "Driver, you've been sitting on my scale for 18 minutes. Either you're heavier than the equipment can read, or you're carrying something that doesn't belong in this world." I turn to look, but the window shows only empty air and the distant glow of the scale house. "What do you mean?" I call out, addressing the invisible presence beside my truck. Hoskins' voice returns, now seeming to come from multiple directions simultaneously. Some loads don't register on standard scales. Some drivers carry weight that accumulates over time, picking up cargo that attaches itself to their rigs without bills of lading or shipping manifests. You've been hauling freight for 8 months. How do you know every mile has been clean? The question hits like a physical blow. 8 months of night runs, isolated highways, stops at truck stops and loading docks where anything could have happened in the darkness. How many times had I parked in areas where I couldn't monitor my trailer? How many facilities had access to my cargo while I slept or attended to business elsewhere? The possibility that something had attached itself to my rig, something that wouldn't show up on scales or manifest records, suddenly seems terrifyingly plausible. I grab my flashlight and climb down for another inspection, this time looking not just for mechanical problems, but for evidence of cargo I never loaded. The steel coils sit exactly as they did when I left the shipper, secured with chains and blocked with hardwood timbers. But between the coils, in shadows where my flashlight beam doesn't penetrate completely, I catch glimpses of something else. Not additional cargo, but something that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. Empty spaces that feel fuller than they should be. The whispered voices on the CB radio reach a crescendo. "You're carrying us now. We ride with every trucker who stops here long enough. We add weight that never shows on scales, but always pulls you toward the ground." The words suggest that the Texarkana Way Station serves as more than an inspection facility. It's a transfer point where invisible cargo attaches itself to unsuspecting drivers, adding burdens that exist beyond physical measurement. I understand now why the scale reads 0. My truck isn't just carrying steel coils, it's carrying the accumulated weight of every driver who's passed through this facility and left with something extra. The blood on my tires isn't from any animal strike. It's evidence of the connection between my rig and whatever feeds on the trucking industry's isolation and vulnerability. Every mile I drive spreads the contamination to new facilities, new drivers, new opportunities for invisible cargo to multiply. The only escape is to abandon the load, leave my truck on the scale platform, and walk away from 8 months of payments and the career I've built. But even as I consider this option, I know it won't work. The whispered voices make it clear that whatever has attached itself to my rig has also attached itself to me. I'm part of the cargo now, carrying weight that will follow me regardless of what vehicle I drive or what profession I choose. Hoskins' voice returns one final time, now clearly audible and coming from the scalehouse intercom. You can leave the platform now, driver. Your weight is recorded, but remember, some loads get heavier with every mile, and some scales measure things that don't appear on any manifest. Drive carefully, and try not to think about what's riding with you in the dark. The electronic sign flashes, "Proceed," in green letters, and the scale platform releases with a mechanical clunk that sounds like a prison door opening. I climb back into the cab, hands shaking as I restart the engine and ease off the platform. In my mirrors, I see the Texarkana way station returning to normal operations. Other trucks pulling onto scales, routine inspections proceeding according to federal regulations. But I know I'm no longer part of that normal world. My CB radio has returned to standard truck driver chatter, my satellite phone connects to legitimate dispatchers, and my tires show no trace of the blood that seeped from them during the inspection. Everything appears normal, except for the knowledge that I'm carrying cargo that doesn't exist in any shipping manifest, but adds weight to every mile I drive. The steel coils reach their destination in Meridian on schedule, and the receiving dock workers find nothing unusual about the delivery. But I notice that other drivers give my rig a wider berth at truck stops, as if they sense something different about my load. My fuel consumption increases gradually over the following weeks, suggesting additional weight that doesn't show on any scale. And sometimes, late at night on empty highways, I hear whispered voices on the CB radio, new drivers discovering what rides with them after stops at certain way stations. I never returned to the Texarkana facility, choosing longer routes that avoid that particular inspection point. But I've learned that some scales measure more than legal compliance. Some inspections evaluate cargo that exists beyond normal shipping documentation. And some way stations serve purposes that have nothing to do with DOT regulations. The trucking industry connects every corner of America, and that connection carries more than legitimate freight. It carries the accumulated weight of every driver who's ever wondered what shadows follow them down dark highways. My 2021 Kenworth T680 still runs strong, still passes inspections, still delivers cargo on time and within legal weight limits. But I know it carries invisible freight that grows heavier with every mile, adding burdens that will never appear on any scale but will always pull toward destinations that don't exist on any map. Because some loads attach themselves to drivers who spend too long at facilities where the normal rules don't apply. And some cargo never reaches its destination because it becomes part of the truck and driver who carry it through the endless night. Let's move to our 10th story. I'm Roy Henderson, 57 years old, been driving solo for 31 years through every kind of weather God and nature can throw at a man. Tonight, I'm pushing a 2017 Freightliner Cascadia 126 through what the Weather Service is calling the storm of the decade. A nor'easter that's turned I-95 through Maine into a frozen hell of blowing snow and black ice. My trailer carries auto parts from a Ford plant in Detroit, bound for a distribution center in Bangor. 43,000 pounds of transmissions, brake assemblies, and engine components that can't wait for spring thaw. The delivery window opens at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I've got maybe 4 hours to cover the last 180 miles if this storm doesn't shut down the interstate completely. It's February 12th. Temperature dropped to minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit, according to my dashboard gauge, and the wind chill is probably closer to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow has been falling for 6 hours straight, accumulating faster than the state plows can clear it. My windshield wipers struggle against ice buildup that forms faster than the defroster can melt it, and visibility fluctuates between 30 feet and 0 depending on how the wind shifts. I've got chains on all drives, extra diesel in auxiliary tanks, and enough emergency supplies to survive a week if I get stranded. What I don't have is enough DEF, diesel exhaust fluid, to make Bangor without a refill. The DEF gauge shows less than a quarter tank, maybe 50 miles of range before the engine management system starts reducing power to comply with emissions regulations. In normal conditions, that wouldn't be a problem. Truck stops sell DEF at every exit. But this storm has closed half the facilities along my route, and the ones still operating are either out of stock or inaccessible due to unplowed access roads. I've been monitoring CB traffic for the past hour, listening to other drivers report closed ramps, empty DEF tanks, and trucks stranded in rest areas waiting for morning rescue. Around mile marker 234, just north of Augusta, I spot what looks like salvation through the blowing snow. A truck stop sign barely visible above the drifts, its neon outline flickering through the storm like a lighthouse beacon. The facility sits maybe half a mile off the interstate, connected by an access road that disappears into white wilderness. But the main sign still shows power, which means they might have fuel pumps operating and DEF dispensers that haven't frozen solid. It's worth the detour if it means avoiding a roadside breakdown in sub-zero conditions. I downshift carefully, engine brake chattering as the Cascadia loses speed on the exit ramp. The access road is a nightmare of unplowed snow and hidden ice patches that make steering feel like wrestling with a wild animal. My trailer slides left on a gentle curve, air suspension hissing as the electronic stability control fights to keep me upright. But the Freightliner's traction control earns its keep, pulsing power to individual wheels until I regain forward momentum toward the distant glow of the truck stop. The facility emerges from the storm like something out of a fever dream. A single-story concrete building surrounded by fuel islands that haven't been plowed in hours. Snow has drifted against the pumps until only their tops remain visible, and the overhead canopy sags under the weight of accumulated ice. But lights burn in the building's windows, and I can see tire tracks in the snow leading to a parking area behind the main structure. Someone else has made it here recently, which means the place might actually be open for business. I guide the Cascadia toward the fuel island closest to the building, praying that at least one DEF dispenser remains operational. The truck crunches through snow that reaches halfway up my drive tires. But the concrete pad beneath seems solid enough to support 80,000 pounds of loaded rig. I set the parking brake, shut down the engine, and pull on every piece of cold weather gear I carry, insulated coveralls, thermal gloves, face mask, and boots rated for Arctic conditions. Stepping outside feels like walking into a meat freezer that's been left open during a tornado. The wind hits like a physical assault, driving snow particles into every gap in my clothing despite the protective gear. I can barely see the building through the whiteout, but I follow the tire tracks in the snow, using them as a lifeline toward what I hope is warmth and help. The tracks look fresh, made within the past hour by something heavy, probably another big rig whose driver had the same idea I did. The truck stop's front door is unlocked, which surprises me given the conditions outside. Most facilities would be battened down tight during a storm this severe, with employees either sent home early or barricaded inside until morning. but the door swings open easily, releasing a wave of heated air that fogs my glasses instantly. I step inside, stomping snow off my boots and pulling down my face mask to call out, "Hello? Anybody here? Need some def if you got it." The interior looks like a truck stop from the 1980s. Linoleum floors worn smooth by thousands of boots, fluorescent lights humming overhead, aisles of truck supplies mixed with convenience store items that probably expired during the Reagan administration. A coffee station sits in the corner, its glass pots half full of liquid that's turned the color of motor oil. The place smells of diesel fuel, stale cigarettes, and that indefinable truck stop aroma of fried food and industrial disinfectant. But no one answers my call. The cash register sits unattended, its drawer hanging open to reveal bills and coins, scattered as if someone left in a hurry. Behind the counter, a transistor radio plays country music from a station whose signal fades in and out with the storm's intensity. The music stops occasionally, replaced by emergency weather bulletins that warn of whiteout conditions and travel advisories for exactly the area where I'm currently stranded. I walk the aisles, looking for any sign of an employee or another customer whose vehicle made those tracks outside. The shelves hold the usual truck stop inventory: motor oil, coolant, snacks, over-the-counter medications, and CB accessories. But everything is covered with a thin layer of dust, as if the place has been abandoned for weeks rather than hours. Even stranger, some items show prices that haven't been current since the 1990s. Candy bars for 50 cents, coffee for $1, diesel fuel advertised at 99 cents per gallon. At the back of the store, I find a door marked "Employees Only," standing slightly ajar. Through the gap, I can see a break room with a table, chairs, and what looks like personal belongings scattered across the surface. A jacket hangs on a chair back, car keys sit beside a half-eaten sandwich, and a newspaper lies open to weather forecasts that predicted clear skies for today. Whoever worked here left recently, but didn't expect to be gone long. "Hello," I call again, pushing the door open wider. "Sorry to bother you, but I need def real bad. Got cash, credit, whatever you take?" My voice echoes in the empty break room, but no one responds. A coffee mug sits on the table, still warm to the touch, with steam rising from black liquid that smells fresh enough to have been poured minutes ago. But the chair beside it is empty, and I hear no sounds from deeper in the building that might indicate human presence. I check my watch. 1:47. I've been inside for maybe 10 minutes, but the storm outside seems to have intensified. Through the break room's single window, I can see nothing but swirling white chaos that makes the parking lot invisible despite the floodlights. My truck is out there somewhere, probably getting buried under drifts that will make escape impossible by morning. I need to find def, fuel up, and get back on the road before the storm traps me here permanently. Back in the main store, I examine the fuel control systems behind the counter. The pumps outside are connected to underground tanks through a computerized dispensing system that looks more modern than the rest of the facility. Digital displays show tank levels for diesel, gasoline, and DEF, all reading full or nearly full. But the system requires manual activation from behind the counter, probably to prevent theft during unattended hours. I'm not proud of what happens next, but survival sometimes requires bending rules that weren't written for life-threatening emergencies. I step behind the counter and activate pump number 3, which serves the def dispenser closest to where I parked. The system comes online with electronic beeps and clicks, displaying "Ready to Dispense" on its LCD screen. I grab a flashlight from the truck supplies aisle, leave a $20 bill on the counter to cover the def I'm about to take, and head back into the storm. The walk to my truck feels like crossing the surface of an alien planet. Snow has accumulated another 6 inches in the time I was inside, and the wind has shifted direction, creating drifts that reach nearly to my knees. My flashlight beam penetrates maybe 10 feet through the blowing snow, just enough to follow my own footprints back to where the Cascadia sits like a snow-covered monument to highway commerce. The DEF tank cap is frozen solid, ice crystals welded to the threads by sub-zero temperatures and constant wind. I chip away at the ice with a screwdriver from my toolkit, cursing the cold that makes metal tools painful to touch, even through insulated gloves. Finally, the cap breaks free, and I'm able to connect the dispensing nozzle and pump 25 gallons of DEF into the tank. The gauge on my dashboard shows full capacity, enough to reach Bangor with margin to spare. But when I try to restart the engine, nothing happens. The starter motor cranks sluggishly, as if the battery is nearly dead, despite showing full charge on the gauge. I try again, pumping the accelerator and cycling the glow plugs to warm the combustion chambers. The engine turns over, but won't catch, leaving me stranded in a parking lot that's rapidly becoming impassable. Diesel engines are notoriously difficult to start in extreme cold, especially when they've been shut down long enough for the fuel to begin gelling. I've got emergency starting fluid in my side box, but using it requires opening the hood and spraying it directly into the air intake while someone else cranks the engine. Since I'm alone, that means rigging a system to hold down the starter button while I work under the hood in blizzard conditions. I'm considering this desperate option when headlights appear through the storm, another vehicle approaching the truck stop, moving slowly but steadily through snow that would stop most cars. The lights belong to a pickup truck, probably four-wheel drive with a snowplow blade mounted on the front. As it gets closer, I can see highway maintenance stenciled on the door and amber warning lights flashing on the roof. State road crew working through the night to keep critical routes passable. The pickup stops beside my truck and the driver rolls down his window. He's a man in his 40s, wearing the insulated coveralls and reflective vest of a Maine DOT employee. "You having trouble, driver?" He calls over the wind. I explain the starting problem, the emergency DEF stop, and my need to reach Bangor by morning. He nods sympathetically. Road crews understand the pressures commercial drivers face better than most people. "I've got jumper cables and starting fluid," he offers. "These diesel engines are finicky in this cold, but we can usually get them going with the right coaxing." Together, we work to position his truck for a jump start, connecting heavy-duty cables between his battery and mine. The process takes 20 minutes in conditions that make every task feel like Arctic exploration. But finally, the Cascadia's engine catches and settles into a steady idle. The road crew driver refuses any payment for his help, saying it's all part of keeping Maine's highways operational during winter emergencies. But before he leaves, he gives me a warning that makes my blood run colder than the wind. That truck stop's been closed for 6 weeks. Owner died of a heart attack right after New Year's, and the family hasn't decided what to do with the property. Building's got power because the utilities haven't been shut off yet. But there's no staff, no inventory, nothing current. "You sure you got DEF from their pumps?" I tell him about the $20 I left on the counter, the fresh coffee in the break room, the computerized fuel system that activated normally. He shakes his head. Computer systems can run on automatic for months after the last human input. And sometimes old coffee makers keep brewing until the pot runs dry or the power gets cut. As for that $20, you probably just paid the dead man's estate for fuel from tanks that might have been sitting there since December. The implication hangs in the frozen air between us like a physical presence. I filled my DEF tank from a system that may have been operating on stored commands in a facility that's been abandoned for weeks, leaving money for an owner who's been dead for a month. But the def gauge on my dashboard shows full capacity, and the engine is running smoothly despite the extreme cold. Whatever I pumped into that tank, it's performing exactly like legitimate diesel exhaust fluid. The road crew driver climbs back into his pickup, warning me to stay on the interstate and avoid any more detours until I reach Bangor. State plows are working I-95 continuously, but side roads and truck stop access roads won't be cleared until the storm passes. I thank him again, engage the Cascadia's transmission, and ease back toward the access road that leads to the interstate. But as I pull away from the abandoned truck stop, I can't shake the feeling that something followed me out of that building. Not a physical presence, but something more subtle. A weight that settled into the cab during my emergency stop. An awareness that I'm no longer traveling alone. The heater runs normally. The radio picks up clear signals, and all my gauges read within normal parameters. Yet the air inside the cab feels different, charged with the kind of electricity that builds before thunderstorms. The drive to Bangor takes 4 hours through conditions that would challenge an Arctic explorer. But the Cascadia never misses a beat. The DEF system functions perfectly. The engine delivers full power, and I arrive at the distribution center just as the loading dock crews report for the morning shift. The auto parts are delivered on schedule, the customer pays promptly, and my logbook shows nothing but routine winter driving through challenging but manageable conditions. But I never forgot that truck stop, or the road crew driver's warning about facilities that continue operating long after their human operators have departed. 6 months later, I'm hauling furniture through the same stretch of I-95 when I decide to check on the abandoned facility. The exit is still there, the access road still visible, but the truck stop itself has been demolished. Nothing remains but a concrete foundation and disconnected utility lines poking up through weeds that have grown over the site. I stop at a legitimate truck stop 20 miles down the road and ask the clerk about the demolished facility. She remembers it well. Old Pete's Place, a family-owned operation that served truckers for 40 years before the owner's death closed it permanently. She mentions that several drivers reported strange experiences during the brief period between Pete's death and the building's demolition, including fuel purchases that went through normally despite the facility being legally closed. State inspectors found the underground tanks were still full, she tells me while ringing up my coffee and sandwiches. Fuel, diesel, DEF, everything current and properly maintained, as if Pete was still running the place from beyond the grave. They say some truck stops never really close, that the spirits of old-school operators keep serving drivers who need help badly enough to find them. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or supernatural truck stops that dispense real fuel to stranded drivers. But I know my DEF tank was empty that night. My engine started normally after the refill, and I completed a critical delivery that might have been impossible without that emergency stop. Maybe some facilities exist in the spaces between normal commerce and necessity, appearing when drivers need them most and vanishing when their purpose is served. Or maybe Maine winters create conditions where the impossible becomes temporarily possible, where abandoned buildings can operate on stored energy and residual commands long enough to help one more trucker make it through the storm. Either way, I always carry extra DEF now, and I never take winter fuel stops for granted. Because sometimes the difference between making a delivery and becoming a casualty statistic depends on finding help in places that shouldn't exist, but somehow do. Staffed by operators who understand that the road never really releases the people who serve it faithfully. The check I wrote for that emergency DEF purchase never cleared my bank account, which means either the abandoned truck stop's financial systems were never connected to modern banking networks, or old Pete decided my $20 on the counter was payment enough for fuel that helped complete a delivery he would have appreciated. Some transactions occur outside normal commercial channels, paid for in ways that don't show up on quarterly statements, but balance the books according to older, more fundamental rules of road commerce. Let's move to our 11th story. I'm Diego Martinez, 43 years old, former NASCAR pit crew chief turned long-haul driver after a racing accident ended my career in the fast lane. Tonight, I'm piloting a 2020 Freightliner FLD through the endless darkness of I-40 across New Mexico, hauling a trailer full of pharmaceutical supplies from a distribution center in Albuquerque to a hospital network in Amarillo, Texas. The cargo manifest lists everything from insulin to morphine. Controlled substances worth more than $1 million on the black market and absolutely critical for patient care. My trailer is sealed with tamper-evident locks, GPS tracked every 30 seconds, and equipped with temperature monitoring that alerts 3 different security companies if anything goes wrong. It's August 23rd. Temperature still hovering around 89 degrees Fahrenheit, even though midnight passed 2 hours ago. The desert air shimmers with heat waves that rise from asphalt like invisible flames. And my air conditioning works overtime to keep the cab comfortable, while the reefer unit behind me chatters constantly to maintain the precise temperature required for temperature-sensitive medications. I've made this run maybe 50 times in the past 2 years. But pharmaceutical loads never become routine. The cargo is too valuable, the security too tight, and the consequences of failure too severe to ever let your guard down. Around mile marker 267, just east of Tucumcari, I stop at a Flying J to fuel up and grab coffee for the final 180-mile push to Amarillo. The truck stop is moderately busy for a Tuesday night. Maybe a dozen big rigs scattered across the parking area, their drivers either sleeping in their cabs or gathered around the coffee station inside. I top off both fuel tanks, check the reefer unit's diesel level, and walk around the trailer to inspect seals and security devices. Everything appears normal. But 20 years in racing taught me that disasters usually announce themselves with subtle signs that inexperienced eyes miss. That's when I noticed the man watching me from beside a blue Peterbilt 379. He's maybe 35, wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, leaning against his truck's fender with the casual posture of someone taking a cigarette break. But his eyes track my movements with predatory focus. And when I make eye contact, he looks away too quickly. Nothing illegal about watching other drivers, but something about his attention feels wrong. I make a mental note of his truck's license plate and continue my inspection, now hyper-aware of potential surveillance. Inside the truck stop, I grab coffee and a sandwich while keeping an eye on the parking lot through the windows. The man beside the Peterbilt has been joined by 2 others, one standing near the fuel pumps, another sitting in a pickup truck at the edge of the lot. They're positioned to observe all exits from the facility, which could be coincidence or could be reconnaissance for cargo theft operation. Pharmaceutical loads are prime targets for organized crime because the drugs are compact, valuable, and relatively easy to resell through black market channels. I pay for my purchases and head back to the truck, taking a deliberately indirect route that lets me observe the watchers without appearing suspicious. The man beside the Peterbilt speaks briefly into a cell phone, then climbs into his cab. The pickup truck starts its engine, but doesn't move. The third man continues loitering near the fuel pumps, now pretending to clean his windshield while obviously monitoring my activities. Pattern recognition from my racing days screams that this is coordinated surveillance, probably the advanced team for a hijacking attempt that will occur once I'm back on the isolated highway. I climb into the Freightliner and fire up the engine, planning to get back on Interstate 40 and call security from the road. But as I ease through the truck stop's exit, the blue Peterbilt falls in behind me, maintaining a steady following distance that matches my speed exactly. The pickup truck exits a different direction, probably planning to intercept my route at some predetermined location. Classic box formation, designed to trap my truck between multiple vehicles where escape becomes impossible. My satellite communication system connects immediately to the pharmaceutical company's security center, where a dispatcher named Rodriguez takes my report with professional calm. "Diego, we're tracking your GPS location and monitoring your route. 3 unmarked vehicles have been shadowing pharmaceutical loads across New Mexico for the past month. FBI task force is investigating, but we need you to stay on major highways and avoid any stops until you reach Amarillo." The confirmation that this is part of a larger pattern makes my hands shake slightly as I grip the steering wheel. The blue Peterbilt continues its pursuit, never closer than a quarter mile, never farther than half a mile. Whoever's driving knows exactly how to conduct mobile surveillance without attracting attention from other motorists or law enforcement. But I've got advantages they probably don't expect. 20 years of pit crew experience taught me to think strategically under pressure, to anticipate problems before they become crises, and to coordinate with team members when facing challenges that require multiple people working in perfect synchronization. I key up my CB radio and broadcast on channel 19. Eastbound I-40, pharmaceutical load being followed by blue Peterbilt, New Mexico tags. Any drivers in the area? I could use some company. The response is immediate and reassuring. 3 different voices offering assistance, asking for my exact location, promising to monitor emergency channels. The trucking community takes cargo theft seriously because every successful hijacking makes all loads more dangerous and expensive to transport. Around mile marker 321, the pickup truck I'd seen at the Flying J appears in my headlights, pulled over on the shoulder with its hood raised as if experiencing mechanical problems. Classic ambush setup. One vehicle creates a roadblock while others force the target to stop or swerve into the trap. But instead of slowing down to offer assistance, I maintain speed and call out the hazard on the CB. Eastbound drivers, disabled pickup mile marker. 321 might be connected to cargo theft operation. Use caution. The blue Peterbilt accelerates suddenly, closing the distance between us as we approach the fake breakdown. In my mirrors, I can see the driver speaking animatedly into a handheld radio, probably coordinating with his confederates for the interception attempt. The pickup truck's occupants abandon their mechanical problem charade and climb back into their vehicle, preparing to join the pursuit once I pass their position. That's when I remember something from my NASCAR days that might save my load and possibly my life. During pit stops, crew chiefs communicate with spotters positioned around the track, who provide real-time intelligence about track conditions, competitor movements, and potential hazards. The trucking industry has its own version of spotters, experienced drivers who monitor CB channels and coordinate with law enforcement to protect vulnerable loads during high-risk situations. I switch to Channel 9, the emergency frequency, and broadcast a message using terminology that legitimate truckers understand, but criminals might not. Channel 9 emergency, pharmaceutical load eastbound the 40-mile marker 325, requesting spotter assistance for cargo protection. 3 vehicle tail, coordinated operation, need eyes from altitude. Within 60 seconds, a voice responds with the authority of someone who's handled these situations before. Pharmaceutical load, this is Overwatch. We have helicopter support inbound your location, ETA 8 minutes. Maintain current speed and heading. Do not deviate for any reason. Overwatch is a private security company that specializes in protecting high-value freight using aerial surveillance and coordinated ground response. They work with major pharmaceutical companies to monitor shipments through high-risk corridors. providing the kind of protection that individual drivers can't arrange on their own. The knowledge that a helicopter is en route changes the entire tactical situation. Cargo thieves avoid operations that involve aircraft because air support makes escape nearly impossible. The blue Peterbilt immediately drops back, increasing following distance as if the driver suddenly lost interest in my truck. The pickup truck pulls back onto the shoulder, no longer attempting to intercept my route. A third vehicle I hadn't noticed, a dark sedan that had been pacing me in the left lane, accelerates past and disappears into the distance. The coordinated pursuit dissolves as quickly as it formed, probably because the criminals monitor emergency frequencies and heard my call for helicopter assistance. 8 minutes later, I spot navigation lights in my mirrors. A helicopter flying low and fast, paralleling the interstate. The aircraft passes overhead, then circles back to maintain position above my truck. On the CB radio, the pilot identifies himself. Pharmaceutical load, Aerial Unit 47 has visual contact with your vehicle and surroundings. We count 3 suspicious vehicles maintaining distance, but no longer in direct pursuit. Continue to Amarillo. We'll provide overwatch until you reach the customer facility. The final 120 miles to Amarillo pass without incident, the helicopter maintaining discreet surveillance while I complete the delivery on schedule. The hospital's receiving manager is familiar with the security protocols. Pharmaceutical shipments often arrive with various levels of protection depending on cargo value and threat assessment. He inspects the tamper-evident seals, verifies the GPS tracking data, and signs for $1 million worth of medications that will save lives and reduce suffering for patients across the Texas Panhandle. Back at the hospital's parking area, I'm approached by 2 FBI agents who've been investigating the cargo theft ring that targeted my load. They confirm that the blue Peterbilt, pickup truck, and sedan were all part of an organized criminal enterprise that's stolen more than $10 million in pharmaceutical supplies over the past year. My call for helicopter assistance disrupted what would have been their largest single theft, and the aerial surveillance provided evidence that led to arrests of 5 suspects within the following week. The agents explained that pharmaceutical theft has become increasingly sophisticated, with criminal organizations using professional surveillance techniques, encrypted communications, and inside information from corrupt employees at shipping facilities. They target loads based on cargo value, route vulnerability, and driver experience, preferring to rob newer drivers who might panic under pressure rather than veterans who know how to coordinate effective resistance. But they also emphasize that my response was textbook perfect, maintaining communication with security dispatchers, alerting other drivers through CB radio, requesting specialized assistance when needed, and never stopping or deviating from the planned route despite intimidation. "You did everything right," one agent tells me. These criminals count on drivers being isolated and afraid. When drivers fight back intelligently and coordinate with security resources, cargo theft becomes nearly impossible to execute successfully. The experience reinforces lessons I learned during my racing career about the importance of preparation, communication, and teamwork when facing high-pressure situations. NASCAR pit crews succeed because everyone knows their role, practices coordination until it becomes instinctive, and maintains constant communication during critical moments. The same principles apply to cargo security. Drivers who know their resources, understand threat patterns, and coordinate with security professionals create an environment where criminals can't operate successfully. 6 months later, I'm still hauling pharmaceutical loads through the same corridors. But the security landscape has improved dramatically. The FBI task force dismantled the theft ring that targeted my truck, recovering millions in stolen medications and arresting more than 20 people involved in the operation. Pharmaceutical companies have upgraded their security protocols, installed better tracking systems, and established closer cooperation with law enforcement agencies that specialize in cargo protection. More importantly, the trucking industry has embraced the spotter concept that helped save my load. Experienced drivers now monitor emergency channels specifically to assist colleagues who face security threats, creating an informal but effective network of mobile surveillance that makes cargo theft much more difficult. When criminals know that attacking one truck might trigger coordinated response from multiple drivers plus helicopter support, they tend to look for easier targets in other industries. The blue Peterbilt I remember from that night now sits in an FBI impound lot, its driver serving a federal sentence for conspiracy to commit cargo theft. The pickup truck was recovered with sophisticated radio equipment, GPS tracking devices, and detailed intelligence files on pharmaceutical shipping routes. Evidence from both vehicles helped prosecutors build cases against the entire criminal network, resulting in sentences that totaled more than a century in federal prison. But the most important outcome wasn't the arrests or recovered cargo. It was the knowledge that drivers who refuse to become victims can protect not just their own loads, but the entire industry's security. Every successful defense against cargo theft makes criminals less likely to target truckers, because word spreads quickly through criminal networks when operations fail consistently. The best security comes from drivers who understand that they're never truly alone on the highway, that help is available when they know how to ask for it, and that fighting back intelligently is usually more effective than passive compliance. The hard truth about highway predators. After 43 years of life and 25 years in high-stakes professions, I've learned that predators, whether they're targeting race cars or big rigs, always count on their victims being unprepared, isolated, and afraid. They study patterns, exploit vulnerabilities, and strike when they think no one is watching or able to respond effectively. But they also abandon operations quickly when faced with organized resistance, because criminals prefer easy targets over battles they might lose. The road tests every driver eventually, but the test isn't about individual heroics or foolish bravery. It's about being smart enough to recognize danger, prepared enough to respond effectively, and connected enough to coordinate with others who can help. The drivers who survive and thrive are the ones who understand that trucking is ultimately a team sport, even when you're sitting alone in a cab at 3 a.m. on an empty highway. Your life, your load, your choice. If you're out there right now, rolling through the darkness with valuable cargo and watching shadows in your mirrors, remember this. You have more power than you think, more resources than criminals expect, and more support than the isolation makes you believe. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Use your communication equipment to stay connected with people who can help. Fight back intelligently when threats emerge. And never, ever give up on making it home safely. Because somewhere people are counting on you, your family, your dispatcher, and patients in hospital beds who need the medications you're protecting with your skill and courage. The highway belongs to those who refuse to let fear drive their decisions. Make sure that's you.